Jeff Norton on the Paranormal State Radio Network.
That is right, Andrew. This is the Midnight Ocean Radio Show and a podcast. I am your host, Jeff Norton. You can join me here live every weeknight from 10 p.m. till 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time or on the web at www.themidnightocean.com. Oh, man, do we have a show for you. Yes, we have Brook Agnew is going to be joining us in a few minutes. We're going to be talking about the hollowed earth. For those that know Brooks, you will know that he has spent quite a bit of time. You know, you got to respect a man who believes in something and is willing to put a vast fortune behind it. It was really good. Now, Brooks is saying that we have some choppy words. I want to make sure, guys, that you can hear me. Those in the chat room, let me know. And everything, yeah. So we had a little bit of audio difficulty there, but we'll push on. Maybe they don't want us to talk with our very special guest, Brook Agnew. We'll take care of a little bit of housekeeping items here. Obviously, if you're joining us on Facebook Live, please share the show with your friends, family, and other groups. We appreciate it. If you are, I got to stop getting distracted. I'm like a little kid in here. Getting way too many distractions. Got too many chat rooms coming at me. Stuff. Thank you, Deb. And if you're joining us on Twitter, if you are not joining us on Twitter, you need to sign up. I promise we will not spam you. We will only send you out information as it regards to the show. And you can find us on Twitter at the MN Ocean. That's the MN Ocean. And of course, YouTube. Can't leave out YouTube there. If you are joining us for the very first time on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button. That is very important to us. It helps us grow the station and lets our sponsors and advertisers know that we're reaching out. We're growing, which is incredible. Who would ever think? Who would ever think that we'd have the listeners this short into the game? We're doing a great job. And, I can't take credit for that. I've always said a great show comes from great guests. And we definitely have them lined up for you this week. And, last night's show was just incredible. If you haven't had time to get to listen to it, I highly, highly recommend that you download it. Talking about downloading, we do have the new iPhone and Android apps up and running at the site at themidnightocean.com. Very little effort now. All you have to do is install those apps on your smart device, and it will do the rest for you. Technology. It's amazing how that works. But getting back to our cool guests, we definitely have one in store for you. Now, I'll have to say Brooks is a repeat guest on the show. And, I will tell you, this tells you how much of a noob I am. I had no idea. Brooks, we had a great conversation on time travel and various other scientific topics. Didn't even know that I was talking to the king of the Hollow Earth movement. And I'll tell you, it is impressive. And I've always said that it's one thing to believe in something. It's another thing to put money behind it. And this man definitely has done it. For those that don't know, Brook Agnew grew up in Pasadena, California, hung out at JPL and Cal Tech. He entered the Air Force in 1973, where he graduated top of his class in electronics engineering. He then received his bachelor's of chemistry from the Tennessee Technological University with honors. And I'll tell you guys, I know the school. It's hard enough to get in. To get out with a degree is difficult, and to get out with a degree with honors is almost nearly impossible. He is a multi-patented engineer in energy technology and chemistry. He's a certified quality engineer, a SixSigma master black belt, and member of the Society of Automotive Engineering. He is also a 7-time Amazon best-selling author and a world-renowned lecturer. And he is known for what we're going to be talking. He's known for a lot of things, but he's definitely known for what we are going to talk about tonight, which is the hollowed earth. Welcome back, Brooks.
So good to be back. And it's true, I am a repeat offender on the Midnight Ocean.
You're a repeat offender. That's and I appreciate it. Thank you for coming back. It says a lot when guests actually, when you reach out to them and say, "Hey, look, can you come back on the show?" And they go, "Yeah, sure." We did something right or correct. So I do appreciate it. And as I say, I didn't know what I had the first time we spoke. It was funny because, of course, I've heard of you on Coast to Coast, and I hear so many guests on different shows, and I went back to the archive, and I'm like, I cannot believe I was kicking myself the whole time on the first show, Brooks, because I didn't, at the end of the show, we started to talk about the hollow moon, which then in turn led into the hollow earth, and I was like, oh my God, I got the guy. I got the hollow earth guy, and here we are talking about time travel, but that's a different show. I love that show as well, so I can only imagine what this one's going to be like.
We only had 3 hours, so let's see what we can crack open tonight.
Let's see what we can do tonight and stuff. So let's talk about, obviously, we're here to talk about the hollow earth. How did you get involved in this whole concept of the hollowed earth?
Well, it was totally by accident. My co-author and I were doing research for the Arc of Millions of Years series, which was a 2,000-page study into the end times in 2012. And in the many sources that we checked out, somebody sent me a book. I think it was called Our Hollow Earth. I can't remember the name, and that was way back in 2001. But anyway, I read it, and I thought, well, that's very interesting, and I put it on the shelf because, I'd been to college. I knew for sure we lived on a molten ball floating through space, and that we existed on tectonic plates that move around like cornflakes in a bowl of milk. Everybody knew that. It was settled science, so I didn't pay any attention to it. But as we accumulated more evidence about the origin and destiny of planet Earth, some categories of data started to fall into place, and I dug that old book out and went through it again, and I said, well, what do you know? I call it sand in the balance, like you have a double beam balance, and it's tilted one way, but then over time you just put enough sand in the other side of the balance that it begins to go level, and then the whole issue is in question again. And that's what science is all about, is we are constantly questioning the things that we call axioms or postulates or even theories. To be a theory in science, you have to first have a hypothesis and then gather a bunch of data through experimentation, prove or disprove the hypothesis, repeat those experiments somewhere else in an independent source, and then you can assert your theory. So when evidence started coming in from strange places like seismograms, we'd been collecting seismograms, at the USGS for 50 years. But they were just that, seismograms. They were printouts. They were graphs. Well, Dr. Y. Sessions at Washington University commissioned a team of grad students to take those paper records, crunch all the numbers into a database, and then analyze the numbers. And what they came up with was, after going through 600,000 of these, that's a lot of data. But what they found were the damping waves of another ocean underneath the Atlantic Ocean, inside the crust. And I thought, well, that's a pretty good chunk of sand in the balance there. Then we, around the same time, started taking pretty comprehensive visual pictures and other wavelength pictures like X-ray and infrared, and even ultraviolet pictures of the Earth from space. And one of the things that we noticed in some of those photographs is that there were borealis over both poles at the same time. And we had always thought that, it's kind of a seasonal thing. It's over the north, it's over the south, it's caused by the solar wind. We all know this. But for it to be over both poles at the same time meant that maybe there was another source for the northern and southern lights that we call the aurora or australis borealis. And so NASA, or my buddies at JPL, put together a 5-satellite probe system, which they called the Themis probe. It could be called Themis probe if you want to pronounce it that way. But it's basically a single can with 5 satellites in it. They launched it into space. Each of the satellites was at a different orbit, so they're going different velocities. And occasionally those 5 satellites line up with each other, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, from space down to the Earth. They turn on and make their measurements, and during that synchronistic alignment, if there is a borealis, then they take all the measurements they can to see if they can find a source for it. So, as luck would have it, in 2009, they published a paper with one observation. One. And that was, there was an explosion, they call it a cosmic bullet, that exploded between satellites 4 and 5. And as the shockwave went toward Earth, 3, 2, 1, and down to Earth, boom, the northern lights formed, and then the other way it went out into space. So they published their paper saying, okay, we've discovered the source of the aurora borealis. It's caused by cosmic bullets. End of paper. Well, I mean, I wasn't the only one that wrote, but I wrote back and said, hey, one observation does not a study make here, guys. Maybe it could be caused by ion flow from inside the planet coming through thin places in the crust at the poles, like a magnet, like the original accretion disk would have, like a quasar. And that maybe what we're talking about here is interaction between this electron jet coming out of the center of the planet, going out through the poles, and the ionosphere, and that's what's causing the northern lights. In any case, it was enough of a question across enough professional organizations that they spent a few $1 million to launch those satellites up there and check it out. So that was another piece of sand in the balance. And then shortly thereafter, we decided Pluto was not one of our 9 planets because, well, it was hollow. And then we discovered that Enceladus was hollow. And then we discovered 3 other moons that were hollow. And not only were they hollow, but they had liquid oceans on the inside of them. And so the idea that planets form as hollow spheres began to take root again. At least what it did is it brought the hypothesis back to life that planets form as hollow spheres. Newton thought about it. Edmund Halley thought about it. And there were, in fact, one scientist, I'm trying to remember his name now, he even patented the idea of a hollow Earth. So a lot of people have thought about it. And now we have enough data from ancient observations, ancient civilizations, space-based data, sea-based data, this is also interesting. Coincidentally, not trying to make for myself a resume or a pedigree, but coincidentally, one of my ancestors is Sir James Ross, who is the man who discovered the North Magnetic Pole in 1831. I showed his picture one time at a lecture I was giving, and everybody started laughing. And I went, what's so funny? And I looked up at the picture, and somebody in the audience said, well, that looks just like you. So I made a joke out of it and said, I'm back. Anyway, he was kind of a crazy guy in the sense that they went up there in wooden ships looking for the North Magnetic Pole. They got locked into the ice on their first expedition. The ice crushed their ships. Of course, they got off the ships and made camp on the ice, and they were rescued. And then darn if he didn't raise the money to do it again. Yeah. Only this time he was successful and did find the North Magnetic Pole. So, and we realize that that's different than the actual geographic North Pole that we have. And it moves around. It's been moving at the rate of, between 15 and 25 miles a year now toward the Siberian desert. Correct. Which is pretty remarkable that would move. Now, that also points to the idea, at least as far as planetary core geology, that we have a solid core, not a molten core, because otherwise the North Magnetic Pole would be pretty stable, because just the data points would make it stable. So this is another piece of data that was actually put in place. And it's interesting because the first time the data was put in place, it actually did not make sense. What they discovered was, it was a Japanese spectrographic measurement. What they discovered was that the center of the Earth is actually a solid iron crystal, one solid iron crystal. And that it had a resonant frequency, which was probably within probability of the range of what the frequency should be. But they determined that the temperature was about 5,000 degrees C, which wouldn't work. That's too cold for it to put off that frequency and for it to be a solid iron core. So it was kind of shelved until a couple of years later. The experiment was redone a different way. They actually took iron, put it into what's called a diamond anvil. This is a very small press where they can put a tremendous amount of pressure on a very small point. And they were able to bring the carbon to the physical state of density that we would expect the core to be. And then they hit it with a laser and brought it up to 6,000 degrees C, and it gave off the proper frequency. So that determined that the core of the Earth is actually at 6,000 degrees C, which is the same as the very close surface of the sun. And that would make sense. And so that observation also fell into the balance and was legitimate. Now, the interesting thing about that is that iron at that temperature does put off white light. It's not a fusion reaction like the light that we see, which is basically a harmonic collection from fusion, which are all the photons that are put off by putting two hydrogen protons together. This is just the upper shells of electrons in the iron atom that are being excited and fall back down to a different state and emit a photon in that wavelength of light. So the question is it enough to support photosynthesis? And the answer is yes. We have lights that are made this way, and they're called grow lights, and we use them to grow plants. So yes, that light would be good for photosynthesis. And if that's the case, well, you have all the pieces. If you have a space and you have the right wavelength of light and you have water, I can guarantee you there's going to be life there.
Yep. Yeah.
So that's what kind of sucked me into it. But it was a 4 or 5 year process. And I thought, there's only one piece of data missing, Jeff, and that is we need to go to the Arctic Circle and look for ourselves. Because we searched, of course, everybody goes to the web and tries to look for pictures of the Earth, of the Arctic, and there just aren't any. The ones that are there are really old, and they're made what are called strip shots, which are basically 100 nautical mile wide strips taken of the Earth, and then they're stitched together to make a total picture of the Arctic. Yeah. Unfortunately, the stitch points are about 400 miles across, so it leaves a hole in the middle. It leaves a hole in the middle 400 miles across, so everybody says, oh my gosh, look, there's a hole in the top of the Earth that's 400 miles across. No. Yeah. That's not true. That's just the way the film is stitched together in those old 1968 photographs. But honestly, we don't have any modern day imagery above the 60th parallel.
Yeah, I mean, so we don't have any satellites or anything like that. So the images.
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah, absolutely. But the images are not available.
What?
Yeah. In 2006, EUMETSAT and the NOAA agreed to pass a global ban. It's called the Data Denial Act. And what it does, it prevents any imagery, any real imagery above the 60th parallel to be made publicly available.
Why is that?
My best guess is security reasons, because the imagery could be fed into cruise missiles and be used to put what are called nav maps together, or navigation courses together, for low altitude subsonic missiles to be able to fly a route.
But that, I mean, to me, that doesn't make sense, because you know darn well the government, all right, so the rule is they can't make them public. Well, okay, the government's not going to make them public. That doesn't mean, you know, if they're concerned about cruise missiles flying around, that makes zero sense, because, I mean, you can't tell me the government hasn't mapped it.
Oh, of course they have. Of course they have, but the data belongs to them.
Yeah.
They don't want anybody that's not them.
Well, actually, the data belongs to us, because it's our, you know, when we talk here in the United States, you know, NASA is not a government agency. They don't have top secret classifications.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, they are run under military auspices, and most of the flight control is done, you know, by the Air Force. So, I mean, all my experience with JPL, and I just did a couple of co-ops with them, you know, their security is rock solid.
Yeah, their contract, and I actually had a NASA employee on here, and she said NASA is not a government agency, and they don't have security clearance. They don't. NASA itself. Now, that doesn't mean that the contractors and the subs and the work that they do work, or the companies and organizations they do work for, that doesn't mean they don't have security clearances. But she said NASA itself doesn't. But then again, who owns the satellites, right?
Administrations are a little different animal when it comes to the agency government.
Yeah.
Which is made up of, you know, bureaus, agencies, departments, and administrations. And administrations are more service-oriented, but they still have about a $640 million annual budget. Sometimes it goes up depending on what the project is at the time. Yeah. And NASA is managing about 71 or 72 active space programs right now.
Yeah, we actually had a space journalist on last night, and I think the NASA budget's about 17. The total budget is about 17 billion.
Yeah, the total, but that goes out to launch engines, and it also goes out to JPL, which does a lot of the satellite construction itself in Pasadena. In fact, my guy that I graduated with, Jim Helsper, stayed with them and then ended up going to work for Hughes, and he worked for them for 18 and a half years. And then he went to work for Anderson Consultants. So he basically flies back and forth from California to Washington to negotiate policy contracts.
Sure. It's just, I just find it, you know, that actually leads. And now, see, the sand for me is all the other stuff is like, I'm kind of like, you know, my hands-on scientist. But the fact that we cannot, and the fact that you can't go to the North or South Pole without permission, you just can't go. You can go to the North Pole, but the South Pole is a multinational, what's called an affiliated base. That is to say, it has a military contingent, but also has a higher educational, which is basically polar research grants and thus government affiliation. But the Arctic is not that way. Yeah, Arctic's pretty much run by the Russians. Yeah. Wow. So let's take a quick break here, Brooks, and we'll come back and we'll talk about your desire and you putting together an expedition because I know that you were big into that, and we'll talk about what happened and where we stand and what we're going to do. But I never thought about the fact that with all this imagery, I mean, that right there is the sand in the hourglass for me. The fact that we can't get reliable, clear, concise pictures of the poles. Wow. And the fact that they are protected under government lock and key. But we're talking about a very special guest, Brook Agnew.
This is the Midnight Ocean with Jeff Norton on the Paranormal State Radio Network. is the Midnight Ocean with Jeff Norton on the Paranormal State Radio Network.
That is right, Andrew. This is the Midnight Ocean Radio Show and podcast. I am your host, Jeff Norton. You can join me here every weeknight from 10 p.m. till 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hey, guys, I want to tell you about a couple things. Number one, this show would not be possible. You wouldn't be listening to the show unless we had the great donations and contributions of listeners and also some guests, believe it or not. And I want to say thank you to Scott Lemriel for his generous contribution. Get over to his website. You can actually look up Scott. Just type in Scott in our search button and learn all about him and what he's doing. And also, I want to tell you, too, a great shout out to Brendan. Brendan over there at Liver Medic has tremendous. I will tell you, Brendan's got me on this regimen of liver cleansing, and it is incredible. I didn't take it over the weekend, and all of my symptomology came back. It was, and I don't want to go into the details, but all of my symptomology came back, and so I started right back on it the first thing this Monday, and things are going well for me. But it's just unbelievable. So check out Brendan. Go over to livermedic.com and check them out. And then the last, and but not least, is I want to tell you, my good friend Jeff Hayes sent me actual hard copies. When you do these shows, a lot of our books we receive are actual PDFs. I like hard copy books. I'm not a PDF kind of guy. I understand the technology and not wasting the trees. But so I started to reread. I actually read about 4 years ago, The Rise of the New World Order, The Culling of Man by Jeff. And I'm getting back into the series again. And also, he's got another one out called The Rise of the New World Order 2, The Awakening. Great books. That's what's occupying my time right now. Those are the books that I'm reading this week. And I'll tell you, they're just incredible books. And if you want to know more about those, of course, you can type in Jeff Hayes here at the Midnight Ocean, or you can actually go to Amazon and type in Jeff Hayes there. Just a great set of books. But that's my reading list for this week. It will change. I plan on the Rise of the New World Order. Is going to take me a few days to get through it. It's a little bit thick, but we'll get that done and everything. But I'm not here to to take away any more time from our very special guest, Brook Agnew, because last time we just kind of ran out of time, Brooks. So I want to make sure that we maximize as much time as we have with you today. So I get it. I understand that, like I said, the fact that the government it's like, what do they got to hide? That was, you got me right there. That's all you got to say. They won't let us display any pictures. And the pictures we have are stitched together and if they're there, they're fabricated or whatever. So I agree with you. So you put together a physical expedition, correct?
Well, almost. Oh, yeah. What I did is I realized that there had to be some data. I mean, this was 2006, right? We've been everywhere, seen everything. We know everything about planet Earth, right? Yeah. So I did a little bit of research, and I did find a team. It was headed by a guy named Stephen Curry, who was an experienced expedition leader, and he had an expedition going above the Arctic Circle using a Russian icebreaker, a big one, like 450 feet long. And so I joined the team, and my job was to work on the measuring the curvature of the Earth while we're sailing. Now that's an important measurement, as it turns out, because what we were looking for really was an anomaly in the ocean called the Oceanic Depression. It's a place where the maritime record says sea level is not sea level. And I asked a couple of retired Navy guys. One was a submariner, and the other one was a retired rear admiral. And I asked them, what causes these oceanic depressions? And the submariner couldn't tell me anything, even though he was my friend. He said, I can't tell you anything. I think he knew, but he just wouldn't reveal anything. But the rear admiral said, well, we think maybe these are areas of low gravity, and this is why the ocean kind of dips down in that area. They're just gravitational anomalies where the gravity's low, and so the ocean kind of dips down. And what the maritime record shows is that, in the old days when wooden ships would sail from Europe to this continent, they wouldn't sail right next to each other because oftentimes in the dark or in the fog or with oceanic swells would be driven into each other and crash into each other. So they'd usually sail about 5 or 6 miles apart. They could see each other, but they wouldn't run into each other in the fog, and they could keep away, but also stay together, protect each other from pirates, and give each other more view over the horizon. And what they noticed was in the record that occasionally, especially in the northern climes, one of the ships would disappear for a couple of days, and they just had to stay on course, even though there wasn't any foul weather or anything like that. And then a couple of days later, the ship would pop up, right where it was supposed to be. So the realization was that the ocean dipped down a couple hundred feet there, and even though they were sailing at sea level, that sea level was different than the other sea level. So this strange anomaly occurred. So I asked the Rear Admiral, well, can I propose another idea to you that maybe, actually, he said, these are areas of very high gravity, so it pulls the water down. I said, could these be areas of low gravity, and actually the gravity around that area is pulling the water away from that area, and that's why it ends up being more shallow. And he said, well, that's a possibility too. So that kind of led to the idea that maybe there is a thin place in the crust. Maybe it's not a hole that you could actually sail into, because the ocean is 4,400 meters deep up there. That's pretty deep.
Yeah.
But maybe the crust is thin, and maybe there's a vent. Maybe the two oceans are mixing up there. And if that was the case, we put together a team of scientists, about 100 of us from different universities. Stanford, we had Elizabeth Clark at Stanford University. We had Dr. Y. Sessions at Washington University. We had folks from Berkeley, from MIT. Anyway, it was a pretty good pedigree. We had people from France, and we put together what we considered, because we're only going to get one shot at this. We were going to be on site actually 4, maybe 5 days. Take us 2 to 3 days to get there and 2 to 3 days to get back. So we were looking at somewhere around 15 days at sea, a good portion of that crunching ice to get where we wanted to go. And the location where we wanted to go opened up in 2007, which happened after a very peculiar warm wind that blew all summer long. And it broke off an enormous piece of ice, about half the size of a state. And it opened up the Northwest Passage to sailing vessels for the first time. Well, I don't know, maybe the first time in 100,000 years. We don't really know. A long, long time. So we had a short window of opportunity in which to rent one of these Russian icebreakers. In those days, I think it was the 50 Years of Glory or the Kalibnikov. I think either one of those boats would have worked just fine for us. The trouble was that to rent the boat for 15 days was around $2.3 million. And then it would have cost about $350,000 to get all the scientists from where they are to the ship and then back home. So it was basically round trip. Because let me tell you what happened to Stephen Curry. We hooked up with him. I signed on. That was in August of 2006. And by April of 2007, he was dead. He contracted rapid onset brain cancer, and he was dead in 5 months. It was the strangest thing I ever saw. Yeah. So that was the end of that. Except that the board then called me, where I lived in eastern Kentucky or western Kentucky, south of Paducah. doing a contract for Lear. And they called me and asked me if I would be the new expedition leader. So I said, well, let me think about it for a couple of weeks. So I thought about it and I agreed. And I said, look, this is a big undertaking, and there's a lot of planning, and we have to raise money. So I put in some money. We shot a pilot film, which in 2007, we entered into the Genes of Galileo contest at Nippon Television Network in Japan. We won. We had 17 million Japanese watch our film in one night. And we thought, this is it. We've got the following. We have more people know about Hollow Earth than knew about Middle Earth before the movies came out. And the problem was that, at least in those days, there were no real effective ways to raise money other than just the classic way. Go talk to benefactors and rich people and try to get them excited about thinking about the Hollow Earth. Of course, we talked to National Geographic and Discovery and History, and they all were highly excited about the project, and they all wanted to air it as a mini-series or cover it after the film was made. And of course, they wouldn't let us use their logos to raise money, so we were kind of on our own. Long story short, we didn't raise any money. So by the time, it looked like we were going to get serious benefactors involved, the whole area refroze, and now it's inaccessible, and it probably will be for 20,000 more years.
But wait a minute. I thought global warming was taking care of the ice shelves for us.
Yeah, well, there's a clever marketing plan out there, but that's not the truth. All the world's glaciers have steadily been growing. In fact, their growth has been accelerating since 2007. And the Arctic, what's called red ice, which is the ice that stays through the summer and is snowed on the next winter, is now back to its 1981 levels. And there's no way, unless it just we get a real prolonged, hot summer like we did in 2006, there's no way it'll ever open up again. In fact, the mean temperature up there seems to be going down.
Yeah. Well, in that we were talking about that last night on the show, is that the sunspot cycle is going down. They're in, I think, 2030. They're saying that that Thames in England will actually freeze over. So we're going back into a mini ice age dip.
Could be. I mean, this solar cycle 24 has been remarkably quiet as far as sunspots go. And, solar flares are kind of what help build up our atmosphere, fill up the ionosphere and the energetic layer of the Van Allen belts with particles that protect us from cosmic radiation and galactic radiation. But we really haven't had very many. We've had some coronal mass ejections, and other than the 2004 X-class flares that we had 9 of them. There really hasn't been anything remarkable in solar cycle 24 at all, and we're on the backside of it.
Yeah. So
if we go into a Maunder minimum, it's quite possible that the mean temperature of Earth could drop 0.5 to 3/4 of a degree C, in which case you are looking at a European ice age.
Yeah. It's amazing, and that's a whole nother. It was funny because last night he goes, I can come back and talk about that for 4 hours, and so. But I want to get back to the because as a sailor, I mean, I've always known about this is not unknown, the depressions in the ocean, but I was always taught that they were caused by weather, like low pressure, and they were, basically like a hurricane would eat out a trough, and the winds would push from the center of the low would push outwards. And so if you happen to lie, and I've experienced that where I've been on the right on the cusp of a low pressure coming through, and you do see a drop in sea level, what's under your bow. I've witnessed that firsthand. And so that's what I thought it was. But you're saying that this is actually a phenomenon that's consistent and measurable.
Yeah, it's consistent, it's measurable, and that was a challenge. We asked the question in our teams, how do we measure, sea level?
Yeah.
And, well, of course, the team said, well, let's just use GPS satellites, but unfortunately, above about the 45th parallel, you have to be in the air to be able to use all the GPS satellites. Once you're at sea level, and we're at like 86 degrees north, there's only 2 satellites that you can see from that angle, and that's not enough to get what's called a Z location, or an altitude. So that wasn't good. And of course, we couldn't use sonar because the ocean floor up there is not smooth at all. It's cavernous and has all kinds of canyons and mountains and everything like that. So there's no way to use the sonar to, as a depth finder. So what we came up with was to actually measure the curvature of the Earth with a precision gyroscope. And the gyroscope, we would set it at Helsinki, and then we would sail. And what the gyroscope would do with a fixed reference, of course, is it would begin to rotate as we sailed around the curvature of the Earth.
Correct.
And that rotation would be fixed within probably a couple of decimal points, a couple of hundredths of a degree, or quarters of seconds or whatever, for the distance that we travel. But if we began to sail into an oceanic depression or over the limb of some kind of opening, then the gyroscope would over-rotate. And once we got that notice, then we'd make a right angle turn and let it come back to the original setting, and then we make another right angle turn. We basically do a sawtooth back and forth for a couple 100 miles and create what's called an arc. And then from that arc, we would extrapolate the circumference of the depression and then the diameter. And then we would sail to the center of that and make our measurements. So we figured it would take us 2 or 3 days to find the edge of the depression using that gyroscope. Of course, instrumentally, that's a little difficult to do because most people are familiar with gyroscopes in airplanes, and those are called relative gyroscopes. That is to say, they give you a horizon, and then they will tell you if you're tilted to that horizon. Mm-hmm. That's the way they work in airplanes. The kind of gyroscope we needed was actually the type used to aim missiles. Yeah. So it's a little harder to come by.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, I can see the Defense Department kind of going, well, what are you going to do with this?
Yeah. Well, we could rent one from Honeywell, but there were all kinds of permits. And then one of the challenges was, well, by the way, we're going to box this up and we're going to ship it to St. Petersburg, Russia. So we had sources in Russia where we could get the duplicate instrument, and that's what I think we were going to do at the time.
Yeah, I was going to say, didn't Russia already have them? I mean, I know China probably did. So, but tongue in cheek there. But so obviously this didn't happen for various reasons. And
yeah, it didn't happen. But, a lot of people said, well, the government wouldn't ever let you do it. They would shoot you down or blah, blah, blah. No, that's not true. The Murmansk shipping company had been sailing these waters for 50 years. These were old Soviet vessels that had a few more years of life in them, and they were using them in, civilian tours, 2 in the north and 2 in the south every year. And they had basically a 3.5-year fuel supply, biggest icebreakers in the world. So it was their waters, and we would have no trouble sailing it. No one would have forbidden us from doing it. It was just a matter of cutting that check.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know it's amazing because Sandy and I were looking. We were going to do one of our bucket lists is that we want to do an Antarctic trip, but it's like 20 on the it's about 20
grand
a person.
Yeah, it's 20 grand.
Yeah, a person. So it's not a cheap. It's something that after our kids get married and they don't feel they're not mad at us for spending their inheritance, right?
about $1,500 a day per person.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's still on our bucket list. But, these depressions, for those that don't know, like I said, I've always thought that they were phenomenal of the weather and not actually the curve, but I can see that. And it's strange though, because you have so many people. Well, there's no one really sailing that far north. So I don't think, you're not going to get huge reports from sailors. Or people that are saying, hey, look,
no.
By the way, they have this phenomenon that goes on. So,
well, I thought it was a cool project, and I took a fair amount of, professional hits over the years, because, it's such a whacked out, crazy project.
Yeah.
But when I approached it from a purely scientific point of view and all the hypotheses that I published and the papers that I published and every single solitary appearance, and there were many, many, many over the years, were all professionally done.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, to all fairness, I think it's important because even last night's guest that, he's a space journalist, Robert Zimmerman, was on the show. And one of the things that he did is that he took he's got an encyclopedia basically of science, of all of the information that was gathered through all of our space travels and all of the hypotheses that came about from those, the planets, everything, all of these theories. And basically last night on the show, he said, pretty much, he didn't say everything in the encyclopedia was wrong. But he said, we've proven already that most of the stuff is what we thought even in the 60s that we thought was hard science. Today, we're proving wrong. That is not the case. And so, one of the things I heard someone critique said, we know more about Jupiter's inner workings than we do our own Earth. I heard that.
That's pretty much true.
Yeah. I mean, it's just... It's sad. I don't know why we have such an aversion to want to learn or not want to learn and experience our own Earth. And we do. I mean, there's a lot of geologists, but now they're all focused on climate change. I haven't heard any hard geology come out talking about anything other than the effects of climate change on the Earth.
Well, that was, one of our themes was, what are really the effects of global warming? We were going to take surface ice samples and look for microbes and pollen and bee wings and, all that. And there were, like I said, some zoological reasons for going too. One of the things that my ancestor discovered was a little tiny seagull, which he named the Ross gull after himself. And it's a little tiny seagull that actually flies north for the winter. And we don't really know where it goes still to this day. I talked to the world's top ornithologist, and they couldn't figure out where it flies. Excuse me just 1 minute. I'm going to close the door. I'm getting a little background noise. Hold on.
That's fine. That's fine.
Maybe it's on his side.
Yeah, at least you don't have the sirens in the background.
Oh, is that what it was?
Well, no, I'm just saying is that, I was talking to someone the other day on the show and they had a fire truck or something that just seemed to park right outside of their building. I was like,
it almost sound like Christmas carols or something.
Yeah, it's hard to do it.
What's going on out there?
Yeah, it's hard to do an interview. It's like, we know you're here. We know the fire truck's here. You can turn that thing off now, right? I mean, I want to
spray some water on it. We're on the
spray
air.
some water on it. Yeah, you don't need all that noise. I mean, the fire's not going to go away because of the siren. But obviously, I'm a science guy, as you know, and I have some questions. And so let's do this, though. I want to make sure that they go uninterrupted, and we're coming in on a break here, Brooks.
Okay.
And everything. But when we get back, I do have some, just some obvious questions that I've never been able to get answered by anybody, especially people that believe in the hollow earth. Like I said, I'm kind of like you. The sands are tipping. The more I do the show, these types of shows, the more I realize I know nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
And, and I definitely, who am I I have not spent the years, and I also want to clarify something else. You are a PhD physicist, correct?
Yeah, that's true.
You don't put that in your bio. You don't ever.
No.
I always I wanted to ask you about that, but and we'll get into that maybe a little bit later. But we're talking with Brook Agnew as we go into a break here. But I just want to share with people. Yeah, Brooks is a PhD physicist. So, we're not talking to some armchair scientist here. And it's amazing to see the progression that he took to follow up, and the fact that it was so great that he was willing to throw his own money, and did throw his own money into the research of the Hollow Earth Project. But we'll be back in a minute with our guest.
Midnight Ocean with Jeff Norton on the Paranormal State Radio Network. State Radio Network.
That is right, Andrew. This is the Midnight Ocean Radio Show, and podcast as we sail into the evening here with our very special guest, Brooks Agnew. And we're talking about the hollow earth. But before we get back to Brooks, obviously we got to take care of a little housekeeping here. If you're watching us for the first time on Facebook, please make sure you share the show with your friends and family. That would be very well appreciated. If you are on Twitter, follow us there at the MN Ocean. And of course, if you're listening to us on YouTube, please, if you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe button. That means a lot to us. I promise you, no matter what you do, we will not spam you. We will only send out information as it pertains to the show, and we only send it out the day of. So you're not going to get a ton of emails and things like that from us. But as we return to our conversation with Brooks, I want to say that it is amazing that we, especially the general populace, are not taught these. I mean, Brooks, we're taught like you were, when in your classic science, especially when it comes to the Earth, the layers of the Earth. You have the oceanic plate, which is 3 miles. You have the continental plates, and then you have the mantle, and then the outer, and then the inner core. So, that's the classic. That's what they teach in at a basic level in most, high school and secondary education. What do you believe? What do you think? What is your belief of? You're
always throwing that word at me, belief. Scientists don't believe anything. Okay. We trust data.
Okay. All right. What is your app? Thank you for correcting me, because you're right. Because what does the data tell you?
Well, when you look at the data that we do have, the best way that we collect it is during strong earthquakes. We have enough seismographic listening stations around the planet. They're all tied together now with very fast switching. So when there's a strong earthquake in, say, the Azores or in Chile, that vibration goes through the planet and arrives at other listening stations around the planet, and we can kind of do a CAT scan of the Earth. As those vibrations are put together, we get sort of a vibrational picture of the inside of the planet. And that's, when we start analyzing this with some of the imaging software that they are still developing, we get a very different picture of the Earth. What we're really seeing is a crust that's about 800 miles thick. And that crust is made of, several different kinds of structures. There is no real image of what we would call a tectonic plate. There's no image of what's called plate subduction. That doesn't occur in any of the images. What we do see are what are called tidal gravity undulations that cause a tremendous amount of heat in the mantle, because the tidal gravity of the moon and other bodies around us cause the crust of the Earth to flex, to stretch and squeeze. And that creates a tremendous amount of heat and energy, which allows the magma to pump its way around and come up in various places. The ocean floor to this day is still splitting open and still filling in with molten material. When we look at the age of the seafloor and we compare it to the age of dry land is about 3.5 to 4.5 billion years old. The seafloor is about 400 to 500 million years old. Some of it much younger than that, like 160 million years old. Huge disparity in age between the seafloor and dry land, which leads us to the conclusion that Earth, the whole planet, at one time was 1/3 its present diameter. Still the same mass, just a different diameter. And if we go by the law of conservation of momentum as the crust expands and cools, it slows down. Just like an ice skater, when she lets her arms out, she slows down. But the core keeps going at its original velocity. So the core is rotating at one speed on its axis, and the crust is rotating on almost exactly the same axis, but much slower. And so the counter rotation between the metal core and the metal crust creates the magnetosphere that we see around our planet. All those flux lines are caused by that counter rotation, not by movement of molten rock inside the planet, which I always thought was a little ridiculous in the first place. But inside that 800 miles, what we expect to see, what we have seen when we do what's called reverse imagery, instead of looking from the earthquake out to the seismographic stations, we look from the seismographic stations back to the earthquake. When we do that reverse imaging, all the shear waves and pressure waves and shadow waves go away. And what we see then is a clear gap between the inside of the crust and the outside of the core, which means more than likely there's a void there. And that's what would create the space for other living things, and another biosphere inside of our planet.
And what, how big is this space, do you estimate? Does the data show you?
Data shows that it's about 1,200 miles from the inside of the crust to the outside of the core.
Okay. And you're saying that the crust is not 5 to 25 miles thick. It's actually 800 miles thick.
800 to 900 miles thick. So when you hear about stories about people entering Mammoth Cave, and believe me, I went to Mammoth Cave dozens of times. I went in every cave. I talked to the people that have worked there their whole lives. The deepest cave there is 360 feet. That's not far enough.
Yeah.
So to say that you could walk into an inner Earth area like that, even if you were walking at a 45-degree angle, which would be very difficult to do, that's like walking an 8-pitch roof for 6 months. That's how long it would take you to get there, which means you'd have to have 6 months of water, 6 months of food, 6 months of light, and that's one way. It's just not possible.
Yeah. So I could see it. I'm envisioning this, and I've been in some pretty deep caves as well. And you're absolutely right. It's even the deepest cave is just scratching the surface, especially.
Well, the deepest hole we've ever drilled is only 8 miles.
Yeah, up in Russia, correct?
Right,
Russia. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just it's. And they stopped because of they said that they had issues with the drill bit at that time. So I guess it's interesting, because one of my questions I was going to say is, how does your data reconcile volcanoes? But you answered that. You're not denying that there's a liquid molten component to the core of the Earth.
No,
You're
not
saying
at all.
it's just not at the depth or the size that has been reported.
Right.
Yeah.
And anytime we see an earthquake, usually if it's really destructive, it'll be up close to, 20, 25 miles from the surface. But if it's, it can be still strong, but if it's deep, like 75 to 150 miles, then the vibrations are quite a bit dampened out, because the point load is so far away from the surface, you don't get so much horizontal movement as you do vertical movement.
Sure.
And, you can go back and look at the geology textbooks, and you can see the seismographic data that's in there. You see the pressure waves, you see the shear waves, they're called P waves and S waves. But then you'll also see the shadow waves, which are sort of a dotted line, which means, well, we got a vibration and we don't really know where it came from, so we're going to draw in a shadow wave. And that's how they explained it.
Sure. And that shadow wave is kind of like because it hits the hollowness, right? Is that what the theory is, or is that what the belief is?
The theory is that it's sort of a reflection wave. It bounces off of some reflective surface inside the planet and comes back up at another listening stations. But that's, very typical when we see what I call cognitive dissonance in science, is where this is the way we know the planet's built. And so when we see data that's outside of that, we try to explain it in terms of what we already know, instead of trying to discover something new.
Well, that was going to be my next question, is how, the science, this model of the Earth, the current, which is I'm going to say the publicized model of the Earth, the one that's taught to all of us as kids. As a child, I didn't know the right questions, but as an adult, I'm sitting there going, look, we're pretty sophisticated now. What are you basing this on? I mean, when you tell us that the mantle is 1,800 miles thick, how do you know that? We've never dug further than 7 miles in the core of the Earth.
It's true.
We've never been deeper than, that's the deepest we've been, is 7 miles.
Were we sophisticated in 1629 when Edmund Halley published his drawings of what the layers of the Earth look like? Were we sophisticated in 1890 when we first started measuring the force of earthquakes with the Richter type instruments? Were we sophisticated in 2006 when we launched the Themis probe, and in 2009 when we took our first measurement with it? Were we sophisticated then?
Yeah.
Well, we're still learning. We're still seeing, even as we go out to other planets, we go to Enceladus, or we go to, Io or Ios, or we go to Phobos, or we go to, some of these Titan, and we see that these moons, which are, not too much smaller than Earth actually, are hollow, and they have oceans on the inside of them, and liquid oceans.
Yeah. Now, and that was actually one of my, so we've already reconciled the volcano. I get it. I can see where that would happen. Wouldn't this hollow space though, because, when you get into fluid dynamics and everything, even with a volcano, wouldn't that fill up with a volcano? If as it was going up, it hit this void, wouldn't that want to fill that up?
Probably what you have are a center of gravity that exists in the crust itself, and a center of gravity that exists in the core. In fact, when we do what's called Lagrangian measurements, which is a point of gravitational equidistance between two bodies in space, preferably one orbiting around the other, it should line up with the center of both of those bodies, but it doesn't. It falls 1,200 kilometers short for Earth, which leads us to believe that the center of gravity is shared between the crust and the core. The crust has a tremendous amount of mass, and the core has a tremendous amount of mass. The core is probably, I forget what they said, somewhere around 13 grams per cubic centimeter, which is pretty darn dense for, anything on this planet. And the crust is, somewhere around 4 grams per cubic centimeter.
Yeah. I mean, and for those that don't know, Newton has proven that this is the Newton theory of inside spheres, right? Gravity inside spheres.
Well, Newton had two mathematical theories. One was called thin shell physics, and this is where basically a two-dimensional surface, let's call it a soap bubble of infinite thinness. That's what he called it. And once you're on the inside of that, then gravity becomes zero. It cancels out. Inside that sphere, it all cancels out. Outside the sphere, you have gravity down toward the surface. But then his next extrapolation of that was called thick shell physics. And the thick shell physics, if you look at the math of it, is just an extrapolation of an infinite number of thin shell physics. It's a progression. Mm-hmm. The trouble is that what he doesn't take into account is as the crust gets thicker and thicker and thicker itself, the center layers develop gravity based on the idea that mass accumulated in one spot is the driving force behind gravity, that it's an attractive force rather than a repelling force. And so the crust itself is going to actually end up with gravity. And that's going to give you a net gravity on the outside of the surface and a net gravity on the inside of the surface. So if there is volcanic activity on the inside of the planet, it wouldn't fill up the center of the Earth.
Yeah, it has its own gravity.
It would go up, but then it would fall back against that crust.
It would pull.
Right. Not so much from the centripetal force, but just from the mass of the crust itself.
Sure. And I can, that makes sense. I can visualize that. But I mean, even if, all right, so let's back up. So the data, because I've been in caves and I know as you get deeper into the earth, the hotter it gets. Right?
Sure.
So, I mean, this might be a very simplistic question. Can life as we know it on the outside of the earth is not the same type of life that would live on the interior of the earth, because you're talking a considerable amount of heat as you get closer to the core.
Well, you're getting closer to the center of the mantle.
Yeah.
Probably as you get to the other side of the mantle on the inside, since it doesn't have any solar radiation at all, the only radiation it's getting is from the core, which is 1,200 miles away. But it's not 1,200 miles away through open space. It's 1,200 miles away through air. So the infrared radiation from the core probably gets highly diffused by the time it reaches the crust. And so it might end up being, 38 to 40 degrees C, which is warm and tropical, but it's definitely not unlivable. Sure. But you are right in one assumption, that life is probably more than likely going to develop differently in there just because it's a different biosphere. And there were some zoological backups for that as well. Prior to 2007, about every 5 years, they have an expedition that goes to Manila. And what they do in Manila is they capture rays, like stingrays and manta rays. And evidently that a particular life form is prone to a lot of mutations. And so they're sort of like frogs of the sea, I guess. Sure. They look at the mutations in the rays, and then they can tell the stress that pollution is putting on the environment. Normally, every time they do this expedition since just after World War II, they see anywhere from 15 to 20 new species of rays. But when they did the expedition in 2007, they found 1,500 new species of rays. Now, there wasn't any pollutant that was put into the water that would have caused, a 30, 40-fold output in mutations. And some of these were enormous. They were like a couple of tons. We also began to net live adult life forms that have been extinct for millions of years. Frilled sharks, dorsal squids, these kinds of things we have fossils of, but we've never seen any alive. Well, we started to net them on a pretty regular basis. And it's clear that these life forms don't exist long in our biosphere. So they had to live in another biosphere. Somewhere there was a vent mixing the two biospheres, and they were swimming into our biosphere, and we were capturing them. So that was one of the ideas, is that we would take deep water samples and look at everything. We'd look at the complex life forms. We'd look at plankton. We'd look at crystallinity, salinity, water chemistry, magnetism. And we should, if there is a sea vent, should see a higher concentration in those changes than we would see, say, off the coast of Florida.
Wow. I'm just, and I could see that. And yes, we are. I mean, we're starting to see, what was it, that the shark, the mammoth shark. There's video and there's pictures of those, they thought they were long extinct, and now they're showing up again off of our waters. And it's just, wow. I get it though. I mean, I can reconcile it in my brain. It doesn't hurt as much as I thought it would, with what you're saying, because I've come to the conclusion is that our science now is much more accurate than the science when they made these hypotheses. And we've never been deeper than 7 miles, but you're saying that there's other physical evidence with the use of the satellites and the use of the seismographs that say, hey, look, the Earth is not what we think it is. Wow. Well,
again, it highlights the cognitive dissonance that we see, especially between disciplines. We don't see geologists talking to astrophysicists. We don't see oceanographers talking to geologists. We don't see either one of them talking to anthropologists or archaeologists. So, this is where the sciences become religions, and they cross their fingers and run in the other direction, shouting heresy when they hear anything that's outside of, their paradigm.
Yeah. Well, it's like everything else. They're all up for that grant money, right? And they want to, and they're not going to get it by standing up there and saying, hey, look, I want to journey to the center of the earth. I'm going to put an expedition.
Well, not only that, when you're an affiliated PhD, you are tasked to publish.
Yeah.
And you don't want to do anything that embarrasses the institution that's giving you that salary.
Sure.
And allowing you to teach a class, 7 hours a week and make $100,000 a year. Yeah. So you have to stay within your box. You don't want to get too far outside of that.
Go along to get along, right?
Yeah.
But that's why we have guys like you, Brooks, though, that are willing to work outside that box, but still come from the class. I want to stress, and I think it's very important, we're not talking to some guy, armchair scientist here. We're talking, you are a trained, highly educated, highly skilled, very well, I want to say out there in the world, patented, PhD physicist.
It's true.
You're not some, a lot of times.
I'm not affiliated though. And by affiliated, I mean, I'm not an academic. I have taught, university level classes, but I'm not an academic in the sense that, I don't teach on the university level. I'm what's known as a commercial scientist, or somebody that works in industry that invents or fixes or modifies things for companies for money.
That's right. Well, that just means you haven't been bought. You earn your keep. And I don't want to diminish it, because I have a lot of PhD buddies who I'm going to be talking to tomorrow, I'm sure, and who are affiliated with universities.
Well, there's two ways of doing it. One is, go ahead, rack up $100,000 worth of student loans and stay in college until you're 30. And the other way is, get out with your bachelor's degree, have your family, go to work. You're working 50, 60 hours a week, but you still want to pursue higher education. Yes. So the big corporations, and at the time I was working for the 84th largest corporation in the world. I wanted to further my education, and they paid for it. Yeah. So I took the classes, the same textbooks that everyone else takes, the same exams that everyone else takes. The only disadvantage that I had is I was working 50 to 60 hours a week, a family with 4 kids at home, and I didn't get to sit in a classroom. I had to take their textbook and use my work experience to go through the textbook, take the same exams and pass them, and submit the same thesis and get it approved. So from my standpoint, my colleagues have about a 90% dropout rate. Only 10 people out of 100 finish the program and get their degree.
Yeah.
So when I got the degree, I actually put it on the wall. That was one. That was one that you hung up. Yeah, I put it on the first 2 books that I published.
Awesome.
But I was so excoriated in the public domain because I didn't sit in a classroom.
Yeah, I got you.
That I decided to take it off my books and I don't put it on my resume because after all, it wasn't the title I was after. It was the knowledge.
The knowledge. Yeah. No, I get it. And but that statement in itself lends credibility to you. I mean, I know guys who are just lifelong college students. My oldest daughter, i.e., and I know those that go out and do. And you're one of those guys that definitely go out and do. But when we get back, I've got a few more questions for you, Brooke. We're going to reconcile this, and wow, just amazing stuff. But our very special guest, Brook Agnew, joining us live from Skype, I have to say. Fascinating stuff.
This is the Midnight Ocean with Jeff Norton on the Paranormal State Radio Network. This is the Midnight Ocean with Jeff Norton on the Paranormal State Radio Network.
That is right, Andrew. This is the Midnight Ocean Radio Show and podcast. Wow, what a show so far with our very special guest, Brooks Agnew. I'll have to tell you, it's just incredible. And we're going to get into that. I'm going to let Brooks tell you his story. He took it on the chin in so many ways for his whole theorem on, the hollow earth. And I think it's fair to say, Brooks, and you did correct me, the last time, the data led you to this. And I can see it. I'm not a scientist by no stretch of the means, but I feel that I'm reasonable, and there is nothing that you have said or done that makes me say, well, that doesn't make sense. I mean, everything. I know the last one. I know a lot of guys like to throw out there. Well, we know the mass of the Earth, but we're finding that we actually don't know the mass of the Earth.
Yeah, we don't really know the condition of the bottom of the sea either.
Yeah.
But when you say I took it on the chin, I mean, yes and no. I mean, you got on the one hand, one of the best resumes in the country for master black belt projects or value stream mapping or lean manufacturing. I mean, I've either created or saved over 10,000 jobs. I've completed over $500 million in projects for several Fortune 100 companies. And I have to say that we've had more than one interesting conversation when somewhere in that project, whatever I'm working on for them, if I'm relocating a plant from Japan to the U.S. or expanding a plant or recovering profits that they're losing, they Google my name and then they find the George Noory interviews. And I don't know, I've probably done 500 interviews over the years on Hollow Earth. And, they'll ask me questions about it. And they'll call it hollow earth theory, or they'll say, you're the guy that believes there's aliens living inside the earth. Oh my goodness, you wouldn't believe the things that I get asked. But, if they give me 5 minutes, then I can pretty much settle that down and tell them, ask them, did you actually listen to the interview? Because never once, ever, in all those years, over 10 years of working on this project, have I said anything about aliens living on the inside of the planet, or that I even believe that the Earth is hollow. In fact, my hypothesis is a null hypothesis. I was actually trying to prove that the Earth is not hollow, that it's actually made the way that we say it's made, and I have been unable to prove it for 10 years.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that is the hollow, the whole hollow earth movement. And I am guilty of it because as we're sitting here talking, I have a backdrop of aliens at the center of the earth. And so people see shows like mine and see you on them and they say, oh yeah, and I don't, and I think, you're very scientific in nature. And I wasn't going to embarrass myself and ask you if you actually believe. Because I know the answer. Well, what does the science say? What does the science say? What does the study say?
Well, that's not to say there is a little boy inside of me that, wants to imagine stuff like that. And, honestly, if I was an ancient civilization that survived some, terrible surface war and had to, go to the bottom of the ocean to survive whatever we did to the planet for a few thousand years, I would probably make home the bottom of the sea. I mean, everything you need is in the ocean. And if you've got, 5,000 or 6,000 feet of seawater above you, you're definitely protected from cosmic radiation and all the other kinds of radiation that, ancient civilizations on Earth may have done to one another. But a few thousand years of a very closed society with a very limited gene pool, and you're going to be unable to go to the mall and survive. You're gonna have to probably act a little bit like UFOs are acting right now. They are definitely as present as they want to be, and no more.
Correct. And you're so right. Bob Fletcher, I had Bob on the show, and he uncovered a $3.2 billion. Well, what happened with Bob, and it's amazing on how all these things tie together, how they knit together. But he started to do the investigation. He was the Iran-Contra deep throat that came forward and talked about and exposed the Iran-Contra. Well, his latest project was tracking down the $3.2 billion money that was missing out of the Pentagon. I mean, we have an ungodly amount of money, even the State Department, billions of dollars that are unaccounted for. And what he's finding out is that we are building massive underground facilities. So it is not, I want to say it is not far-fetched to say that, if even our current political leaders and the one percenters out there are looking at going, below ground. And
they're clearly fleecing the system for everything they can get from it because they realize time is running out. Yeah. Well, if they think time is running out, what should we be thinking?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, let's go back to the mall this weekend.
Yeah.
What the heck?
Yeah, let's watch our football game. Or, let's spend our money on
I'm watching the World Series right now, so don't harsh my gig here.
No, it's all right. Go Cubs. That's all I got to say. Go Cubs.
Cleveland's winning tonight, 6-0 already.
Oh, no. Go Cubs. I wish the Cubbies the best of luck. But, but that just tells you that's the end of days because they said that when the Cubs win there's a couple predictions out there that say when the Cubs win the Super Bowl or the World Series and and pigs start flying. And, it's just, I could say what would the hollow earth, what would it look like on the inner side? Just based upon the research. And I mean, what do you think? What would we envision if I was to
based on
make that
just information that some of our most recent probes, Cassini is picking up some stuff from the moons. We launched a very excellent probe to Pluto, and the pictures that came back from that were just stunning. I mean, there's some lights and things that we still can't explain. We think maybe they're really smooth ice and they're able to reflect the light in a certain way, but the resolution on those optics is just phenomenal. You just can't stop looking at that planet. It's so gorgeous. And what we're learning about the other planets in our solar system is that's exactly how they're built. At least the smaller versions of them, their moons are. They have liquid water, liquid methane. They have plenty of, obviously, temperature. Otherwise, they would be either steaming or a solid ball of ice, and they're not. So one of the things that we realize, even with the Kepler missions, the way we used to find planets wouldn't really tell us much about them. We used to find them through two methods. One's called perturbation, which is where we look for the wobble in a star. And the other is light diminution, which is when the planet crosses in front of the star, it blocks a certain amount of light. And we can take that blockage and now measure it quite accurately and say, okay, this is the diameter and the orbit of that planet. But you also see that that means that we have to be looking at the plane of the orbit. If the planets are revolving and we're, north of the sun, we're not going to be able to see any of those planets. We'll see a little bit of the wobble in the sun, and that's about it. But Kepler mission has been phenomenal. We found thousands and thousands of planets, just unbelievable number of planets, and we're classing them as fast as the manpower can be applied to them. But generally speaking, they're too big, they're too small, they're too close, they're too far. To be able to live all this life, all this variety of life on the surface of a world is now, we know, extremely rare in our galaxy. extremely rare. Is it the only planet that has life on the surface? We don't know. But we do know that it is extremely rare. We have not directly observed or indirectly observed a planet with life on the surface. What we have seen in our solar system and even our moon is that living conditions are probably exist under the surface of most planets. So when we talk about the living conditions on the inside of Earth, if there's liquid water there, that is so far inside, I would say at least SixSigma inside the control limits in which life can exist. It isn't funny. Life can exist on the sulfuric acid walls of volcanoes. Yeah. There is bacteria that lives inside of fuel tanks of jets. There's all kinds of life forms that live in what we call extremospheres. So if the inside of the planet is not an extremosphere, if it's not hugely crushing pressures or enormous temperatures, life is going to be there. Yeah. I can guarantee you that.
Yeah. So you can't define the intelligence or the quantity of life because you don't have the data. Would we have an atmosphere? Would there be a type? Well,
there would be an atmosphere. It would definitely not be a vacuum. It would be based on Dalton's law, which is a law of partial pressures. We would have to have an atmosphere on the inside of the planet very close to what we see on the outside of the planet, especially if there is an opening between the two. Yeah,
you'd have an equalization going on.
Right. Okay. You'd have a vessel, basically. But occasionally, at least in history, we have seen where that vessel has been breached.
Sure. And where have we seen that?
Well, we have a universal flood story where the fountains of the earth opened up, water came out of the earth, flooded the surface, and then took 7 months to recede. So obviously didn't all go back because a large amount of the planet is still underwater. But that's one event, cataclysmic event, where we have seen the crust of the earth open up and water come out of the inside of the earth and cover the planet.
Yeah, I mean, you would. So, all right. So I'm going to kind of think this through. And that was going to be my question. If the earth cracked, I'm thinking that our oceans would pour into this inner earth. But you're saying just the opposite. That
well,
it seems like
it depends. If most of the earth was pretty much dry land and, there were a few seas, but not like we have today, not huge oceans. As the crust of the planet expanded and cooled, and these ocean floors were formed by the crust cracking open and filling in with molten material, the sea level continues to drop. Eventually, when the fountains of the earth did open up, maybe by pressure or what's called an azeotrope, it's where pressure is very high and the matter or the solution exists as a solid, a gas, and a liquid all at the same time. But once you relieve the pressure, it comes gushing out of the earth, flashing to steam, and then it fills up the oceans that are there, condenses and falls out of the sky as rain, and ends up flooding the oceans to the shores that we have today.
Wow. One thing though, and let's go back to one of the theory where you're saying that a lot of the stingrays, we're finding fish species that we thought have been extinct for millions of years. So that does leave the door open that there is a more substantial life form than just plankton or bacteria.
Yeah, I mean, you can say, of course, there would be microbial life, and maybe there is more complex life, like these frilled sharks or dorsal dolphins or rays or other forms of life. But and a lot of these are blind, by the way, when we catch them. But it also leaves the door open for the adaptation of even higher developed life forms.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't even live in our environment. We're not outside, but 15% of the time. The rest of the time, we're in a cave. We're in a house. We're in a controlled environment.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, it's funny that you say that. I had a good friend who was on the show, and I talking about UFOs, and I'm bluntly on the show. They came back and said, "Well, UFOs are in the sky. So how much time do you spend looking into the sky?" And I'm like, I really don't. He's like,
yeah, exactly.
And so now, what's really crazy is now I'm looking in the sky more, and there was 4 of us sitting in the backyard this weekend celebrating my birthday. And I will tell you that there's 4 adults, and we only drank 6 beers. So, we were nowhere drunk.
What are you doing wrong?
Well, we just started. The night just started,
I see.
And a craft flew right over and it was funny. It wasn't funny because I told everybody, I said, I think I saw a couple of shooting stars. I said, look up into the sky and we're in an area where there's really no lights. We have one street light in the whole neighborhood. And I said, look up into the sky because I think we're going to see a meteorite shower. And about that time we look up and there, a shimmy, something, a UFO. I'm going to say UFO in the sense that, I don't know what it was. We don't know what it was. Flew right over our heads.
Wow.
Yeah. That was right. My first experience. The Oranids peaked this weekend, so you would have seen some shooting stars. Yeah. And I think 5 Eagles was telling me that. And so and we looked up and, absolutely right. You got to look up. If you want to see these things, you have to spend more time looking up.
You remember we were down in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and the bar we were at had an outdoor, kind of patio area. And I knew that the International Space Station was going to come over at 9:00.
Yeah.
So I'm out there, having a cigar, whatever. And I'm talking to the guys out there. And I said, by the way, if you seen a spaceship come over here lately? They said, yeah, right. So there's going to be one come over at 9:00. If you want to look up, you'll be able to see it. I don't think you'll be able to miss it. Yeah. And they went, yeah, like, how do you know? So I said, well, I'll show you. So sure enough, 9:00 came, and here came the space station right over the top of us. And it was huge. And it was, you could see the solar panels on it and everything. It was clearly a ship.
Yeah.
And they thought I was an alien. I mean, it's like, dudes, that's the International Space Station.
Yeah.
Don't you ever look up? It comes over every 97 minutes. And they were like, what?
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. But it was weird because, like I said, all 4 of us saw it and we were at different angles too, because we were all sitting, if you think about around the campfire, we were sitting opposite of each other. So each of us had a different perspective on this craft. And you
didn't tell me you had a campfire. These are really important conversations.
Yeah, we had a campfire. It was, it was interesting. It was pretty cool. But when I say it flew over us, it flew actually, and I know the marker because the only light pole, and you couldn't see it. Let me kind of back up. When I first got a glimpse of it, I saw it come out of the tree line, and it looked like a mirage in the sky. Kind of like like if you're looking at a hot asphalt mirage.
Did it make any sound?
Made 0 sound. And so then I'm like, what the heck is that? And about that time, Sandy, who was sitting off to my left, so I'm looking right at it as it crosses my apex from left to right. I'm looking. And then Sandy, who was sitting to my left, so she would have caught the back end of it, right? So she's looking at it as it's flying through. She was like, that looks like a huge, wings, huge wings.
How high was it?
So here we go. So then my neighbor, Linda, who was sitting to my right, so she's looking right at it, dead on, off to a slight angle. She says it looked like because we do have Coast Guard helicopters that fly, that basically when they take off, their flight pattern brings them right over our house. And then they do a U-turn and they go down the Watahoochee, which is a river that goes out to the Gulf. And that's kind of like their flight pattern. And so she said it was about the same height. She thought it was a helicopter. But when she said, she goes, "Oh, that's a Coast Guard helicopter." And I said, "There's no lights and it's not making any noise, Linda." And she was like, "You're right." And so the height was, she thought it was at the height of that helicopter, which I would have to say, helicopters. So you're looking about 500 feet off the deck.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was pretty close. And then her husband, who is, Dennis is one of the most level-headed people. Sandy, I'll tell you, Sandy doesn't listen to my show because she doesn't believe she'll listen to the self-help topics on the show, how to, feel better about yourself, lose weight, that kind of stuff. She doesn't listen to the UFO stuff. She doesn't believe in it. And so she's like, "I have no clue what I just saw, but if it's a UFO," she goes, "that was pretty impressive." And Dennis is like the same way. He's like, "I'm not going to say what I saw because I don't want people to think I'm crazy." But what's really funny, not funny, I wanted to, I didn't have my phone. Sandy had hers, so I grabbed her phone to get a picture of it. She had it locked and I couldn't get it unlocked. It's an iPhone. So I'm like handing it back to her and I'm like, "Get the phone unlocked." I'm kind of yelling at her, like, "Get the phone." And by that time it was already gone. But the thing is that I did record and what I did is I recorded eyewitness testimony and I left a recorder going so it would capture all the conversation after the testimony. And it was incredible. It was, I wasn't afraid like I thought maybe I might be if I saw one. But
so there was no urination involved.
No. It was all, it was beautiful and it was awe. It was like, wow. I can't believe what I just saw.
Earth Explorers is exactly why we don't have a lot of pictures of UFOs.
Yeah.
So the moral of the story is don't lock your phone.
Don't lock your phone. That's right. Look, you're absolutely correct. I mean, you're absolutely correct. And one of the things that I'm probably going to I'll start doing, I'm going to start taking a camera. Forget my phone. I'm just going to take a normal, small, like, camera.
Some of the best stuff out there is done with dash cams. People are driving with dash cams now.
Yeah. You're absolutely correct. I mean, everybody's driving in Russia and stuff. They're all driving with dash cams.
It's just so amazing. I mean, all the meteorite strikes and everything that they've had were best caught on dash cams.
Yep. Yeah, it was intense, but you're absolutely correct. And so, that goes back to the whole thing. We don't know. And the more I do these shows and the more I talk to gentlemen like you and everything, is that we can still approach these topics and still keep a scientific mind, and keep it in perspective. But yeah, I mean, there's something out there and there's something inside. I'm with you. I mean, you took how many years to follow into the Hollow Earth?
I would say 5 years.
Yeah.
I really started to say maybe there's, it's worth forming a hypothesis and trying to put some data together. And not all the data was readily available. I mean, I really had to dig for it and had to write, a few universities and get some papers back. And then once I became kind of the clearinghouse on all Hollow Earth stuff around the planet, I had to go through all the stuff that was like personal testimony, like what you just shared with me. And some of that was actually channelers and people like that, they would just, I mean, they really believed that the earth was hollow and that they were communicating with beings on the inside of the planet. But they couldn't show me any emails or any letters or any rocks or samples or anything. So I have to put it in the category of personal testimony, which, you know, scientifically is fine. A direct observation is a fact. But in the scientific community, we look for a very important term, which is called corroboration. Another witness or some kind of independent piece of data, like a piece of film or a thermometer measurement, or, you know, something that is independent to corroborate the personal testimony.
Correct. And yeah, we have that. And, you know, hey, Brooks, can you stay on for another segment? Are you good to go? Or no?
I can stay on for another segment.
Another one,
sure.
Because I want people to know about what you're doing with your radio show and some of the other projects that you're working on. But yeah, I'm sold. I'm gonna start challenging those people that say the earth isn't hollow, because you got me. It took you years. It took me minutes.
This is the Midnight
So let this cue back, and then
Normal State Radio Network.
then we'll just go ahead and go off to our break. But when we get back, we're going to talk to our very special guest, Brooks Agnew. Find out what he's doing and with his radio show, and how you can reach out to him and listen to his shows and some other things. You know, maybe we'll talk a little bit about electric cars, and we'll wrap up our conversation with Mr. Agnew.
Network.
That is right, Andrew. This is a great song from my good friend Ed Roman. I almost wanted to sit and listen to it, but that would be rude to our guest. But it's a great song. It's called ETA by Indie Artist Nominee of the Year 2016, Ed Roman. Good friend of the show and good friend of mine, I have to say. Who knows? You're going to probably see some pictures of us tearing it up in Jamaica over the holidays. I think there's plans. We might get together. Who knows? So, but without further ado, we want to get back to our special guest, Brook Agnew, and kind of wrap it up for Mr. Brooks. Brooks, so I want to make sure before we move, I think we pretty much covered everything as far as hollowed earth. I want to make sure we didn't leave anything out because I'll get flamed tomorrow on YouTube.
Well, no, we pretty much covered everything. I mean, the major areas. But the only thing that I notice when I go speak on this publicly, no matter where it is, no matter what country it is, there is a phenomenal passion by people about the hollow earth. There seems to be a very powerful, uniting kind of drawing together of I want to say humanity. It washes away all conflict. Everybody seems to want to pull together, work together, love together. And that's so different than what it seems like the New World Order freaks want. That the whole idea of hollow earth is at odds with the people that are trying to control the world.
Correct. And that's why they want to control it, is because they want to control the narrative. And, you know, it's one of those things, it's like a lot of the space things that we're finding out when I had Mr. Zimmerman on last night. You know, the more we realize what we've been told all along is not true and doesn't muster to science. That makes you question other things that have been said. Almost, and what the New World Order has done, though, is they've taken it to the extreme to kind of make it, you know, when you get into the flat Earth arguments and people that are talking about flat Earth. I think what they're now doing is they realize that they have to be part of the absurd as well to kind of get us back in line. But your statement is absolutely correct. I mean, these topics, and what I love about my show is that you want to talk about political spectrum and spanning it. The topics that we have on this show span all political spectrums.
It's a little hard not to, especially in this season. Yeah. And this is the most anomalous election I have ever covered. And it's the first time we've ever seen anybody of the status of Al Capone run for president.
Yes.
And it just really blows my mind that people cannot see that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they don't want to see it is what it is. And it's, and I think a lot of them too have been conditioned not to see it. I think that what the Veritas, not the Veritas, but out in England, what they've done has done a phenomenal job of social engineering. I think most Americans, most people are just blind to this. They're blind to what's going on. And I think it's by design. It's kind of like, you know, here's the latest, email scandal. And, oh, by the way, look at the cute kitten. Oh yeah, that's a cute kitten. You know how that goes. And it's only a few of us who are awake, who are seeing what's really going. And I think that's for both. I don't want to, pick one or the other. I think both of them who are running have their issues, and it's, I don't know. It's just, I had this discussion earlier today with a friend from Canada. He told me that I can come and live there if I wanted to.
I've been there. I'll take liberty anytime.
Yeah, I'll take. Yeah, exactly. I told him, I said, most Americans. I think what it is, the good news is that most Americans, the majority of the people I talk to, have just realized that they got to start taking care of themselves and their families. And they got to do what is right by them. And that's, making sure that they have plenty of food, making sure that they have, reserves. I know a lot of friends are getting out of that debt, paying their homes off, making sure that they have, that the property that they do own, that they think they own. As you know, you don't really own anything in this country.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it gets harder and harder when, you have an organization from top to bottom who has been dedicated since 1992 to driving every possible factory they can find out of the country. It gets harder and harder to pay that home off when there's no factory to go work at.
Yeah, you're right. There is no. Yeah, you're absolutely correct. I mean, it's, and you would know, especially with you're still building electric cars, correct?
I am, and in fact, I'm doing some consulting now for a Ford supplier. So there's still a lot going on in the automotive industry. Where everybody's trying to break through to the next level of technology, but there's also a tremendous amount of opposition from what I call the agency government, the agencies, departments, bureaus, and administrations that have levied their sanctions against the American people, and they are dedicated to beating us.
Yeah.
And looks like they're winning.
Yeah. No, it is. And what's really a shame, and I have to say this, that we get on this show and we talk about esoteric things. And I'm not saying, I don't want to say what we talk about doesn't matter, but it is amazing that when we start talking about the political stuff, or we start talking about what our government does and everything, the truth, how do I want to phrase this? There was an ad. This is so funny. This is how bad it's gotten here in the political environment. There's an ad running in Florida right now about there are more people who believe in Bigfoot than they do in the government in Florida.
Well, sure.
Absolutely. But it's funny that if you think about it, this esoteric, this is the stuff, when I first started listening to Art Bell, you talk to most people and they would be like, you're crazy. You're nuts. And now it's like, when you talk about the UFOs and you talk about that and you talk about how the government is, really, when you talk about the government's out for your welfare, for your best interest, everybody goes, you're nuts. You're crazy. What are you thinking? What Kool-Aid are you drinking?
Now, at least now, people, I think everybody is pretty much aware that when you say the government, they get kind of a glazed over look on their face. Like, what are you talking about? The government? Yeah. Well, there are two governments. There's the one that, if you did some early voting down there in Florida, you check their names off, the elected ones.
Yeah.
But then there's another government that has way more people in it with way more power. And that government is the one that writes all the laws, that makes all the taxes up, that does all the police actions and enforcement actions to collect those taxes and fees and fines. And you have no representation in that government at all.
Yeah.
So that is what the founding fathers called tyranny. We have inside our country an 83-year-old tyrannical government that is now all powerful, and they can commit their crimes, be called before Congress, our elected officials, sit there in front of the committee, lie, take the Fifth Amendment, mislead, refuse to answer questions. They can refuse to show up.
Yeah.
And Congress can do nothing against them.
They can do something. They just refuse to do something.
Well, I'll put it this way. When Hillary Clinton says she testified for 11 hours before the committee, that's actually not true.
Yeah.
She only testified for 3 hours and 45 minutes, which is about what we're doing on this program tonight.
Correct.
The rest of the time, she was getting her feet washed, her makeup done. She was getting all the compliments in the world. Oh, gee, we're so grateful that your highly intelligent self was able to come to the committee, and how political this stupid committee is for even wasting your time to drag you in here. Yep. And there's another 5 minutes gone. And then, of course, they had lunch. So the Republicans are the ones that were actually there to get at the truth, only got to ask questions for 3 hours and 45 minutes. And that's in between all the foot washings and the hair brushings and the compliments and the jokes.
Yep. No, I agree with you. I mean, it is a I'm at the point now, like I said, I got to pull back and take care of my family, because I just tell people, look, it's as simple as this. If you want to go to war with Russia, vote Hillary. If you want to possibly have a chance at seeing your grandchildren, your children grow up without wearing, suits or being under Soviet rule or Chinese rule, then you got to go with Trump. Because I'm hoping that the bromance between Putin and Trump will at least keep us out of war for 4 more years.
Hillary Clinton's going to march us into the ovens.
Yep.
Trump is going to take us off the cliff.
Yes.
But there is a chance, there's a wee chance that there's a safety net off that cliff. And I think I'm going to take my chances going off the cliff. I can tell you what's happening here in North Carolina, because I went to early voting first day, and I interviewed the poll workers.
Oh.
One of whom had worked there for 20 years.
Yes.
She said, I've been here for 20 years. I have never, ever seen this before.
Yes.
I said, what is this? What does this mean? She said, we arrived at 6:45 this morning and the line was all the way to the curb.
Yes.
When I got there at 11, there were still 300 people in line. I took a photograph at 3 when I left. I was finally able to get through the line and vote, and there were 24 polling stations. There were still over 200 people in the line, and that's the first day.
Yes.
And I will tell you, heads up, 90% of the people in that line, or better, were voting for Trump.
Yeah. Well, no, I can tell you. I mean, even here in Florida, they did it's sad. It's not sad. They had 20,000 people show up for a Trump rally. They had 30 show up for a Hillary Clinton rally.
Yeah, that's 30. Not 30,000. That's 30 people.
30 people. Exactly. They had over 20,000 people show up for Donald Trump, and they had 30. And, but the problem is that, well, Florida is one of those major states that he's got to carry, and it is refreshing. And I'm hoping, but I was watching Veritas and I was watching InfoWars today, where they have in the state of Texas, they have suspended the backup system for the electronic voting. In other words, they have
went
the
back to paper ballots.
Yeah. And they got rid of them. They got rid of them. They said that they're to go straight electric. And then InfoWars, the reporter was talking to the election commission and was, trying to get an answer, saying, why are you not going to have a backup system? Because even here in Florida, I don't have the hanging chads, as everybody talks about. We have a cue card. And I think it's like this for most countries, is that you mark who you're going to vote for, and then you run it through. It's kind of like the old test, right? And you run it through the scanner, but there's still a paper backup.
Yeah, it's a large sheet of paper.
Yeah, but in Texas, they're not going to do that.
Color in the circles and then scan it.
Yeah, in Texas, they're not going to do that. It's going to be all electric.
Oh, wonderful. So George Soros is, but I thought they suspended voting for a little bit and changed systems.
No,
because when people clicked the box to vote straight Republican,
it was moving. Yes,
it was selecting Hillary Clinton and Tim Kaine.
Yep. But the good news is the guys that, all right, so let's think about this. The people who are going to vote for Trump are aware of these deceptions.
Yep.
And so the beauty of it is you're going to hear it in mass. And that's why now they're trying to make it illegal where you can't videotape yourself voting. Are you kidding me?
No, you can't. In fact, they made us turn our cell phones off, not just silent, but off once you enter the polling station.
Yeah. But you can't, I mean, I can understand, privacy and all that for other people, but that's a public place. But yeah, they're making you just, and who was it? Justin Timberlake, I guess, is in trouble because he actually took a picture of him voting, and I guess that's a violation. I don't know.
Well, here's my scientific analysis.
Yep.
The pollsters only call landlines.
Oh.
Now, our house, we live in a subdivision with about 350 homes and a lodge and a pool and all that stuff.
Right.
We are probably the only house in 2 blocks that has a landline. Everyone else lives their life off their smartphone.
That's right.
So I have done a survey of 1,000 smartphone owners, and I've only found 2 out of 1,000, only 2 that were for sure voting for Hillary.
Yeah.
So I have, of course, adjusted my numbers a little bit. 78% of smartphone users are going to vote for Trump.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's for a couple of reasons. One is that smartphone users are more or less connected to the social media, Facebook, Twitter, and they listen to some kind of podcast, either Midnight Ocean or X Squared Radio or something, and they get their news from alternative newspapers like Newsmax or Drudge or Breitbart or WorldNet Daily. They don't just get their news off the major networks.
Yeah.
So they're a much more well-informed voter, and they tend to communicate with one another based on their activity with Twitter and Facebook and email and things like that. So that voter is not voting for Hillary.
Yeah.
They're not by any means.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I mean, I agree with you. Most of the people, I do have some friends, associates I know they're going to vote for. They can care less because they just, that's just their belief. But you are absolutely right. Most of the people that I talk to are, they're looking, a guy.
78%.
Yeah.
Mark it down. 78%.
Yeah. And we'll see. We will definitely. It almost makes you want to drill a hole. How long would it take us at a 45-degree incline or to get there?
6 months one way.
6
and
months.
That means you got to carry all the food, all the water, and light that you're going to need, and you better not get injured.
Yeah,
on the way
down, because it's I can see now these tunnelers that we have. I'm going to take it back. Do you know of any? I know that Bob Fletcher, he was on the show. He said, and actually, this was confirmed by Brad Olson, who was on the show a while back, that apparently in Virginia, they dropped one of these deep bore tunnelers into the ground, and it hasn't been up since. So I'm wondering if that sucker is tunneling, like you said, and it's been almost a year.
Well, it could be, but behind that thing, you've got to have a line of dump trucks to haul all the rock and dirt away. So wouldn't be too hard to find its trail.
Well, Brad was saying that they do have one that's made up that it's nuclear powered. And it takes the rock and stuff and solidifies it, and then uses that molten rock as and you're a scientist, so you can flush this one out for us, but it uses that molten rock as the casing. Because right now, the way the systems work is that, they drill and then they have to bring in the casings, and set them in place. But
so let me get this straight. The walls of this cave are going to glow in the dark for 250 years before we can use it?
You see, there you go. All right.
You hear this sound, Jeff? You hear this sound?
I hear you.
This is me shaking my head back and forth.
No, I hear you. That makes perfect sense. I didn't think about it till you just said is that, in order, even if it was nuclear powered, they have to run it through. Yeah, it would be so highly irradiated
It happens every time I melt rock with nuclear energy, I'll tell you. Yeah.
That is true. Hey, but the good news is they don't need light. It'll generate its own light.
Well, hopefully it's not manned.
That's true. Those poor people. I don't know. Like I said, it's pretty sad when it's not sad. I am so happy because of shows like ours and shows like yours, X Squared Radio, that we have more people that believe in Bigfoot in the state of Florida than believe in our politicians. So that's it. So talk about X Squared. What are you doing these days, my friend?
X Squared Radio. What a neat hobby. I started X Squared Radio in March of 2005.
Yeah.
And what happened was we wrote the first volume of The Ark of Millions of Years, and my co-author and I published it in November of 2004. And within about 3 months, that book had made it to number 38 on Barnes & Noble, and it was rocking.
Yeah.
And I tell you, Jeff, I had no idea people were interested in this stuff, honestly.
Yeah.
We thought we were really accomplishing something writing a book, but that started things off, and I got a few radio interviews, and I used to dabble in radio when I was in high school.
Yep.
So I had a producer call me and say, listen, I have airtime available, and I'd like to put you on every Wednesday night for 1 hour. So I thought, Wednesday night, 1 hour, I could do that. So I did that for 3 months, and he called me back in June, and he said, this isn't working. I said, oh, well, listen, I gave it a shot. He said, no, you don't understand. You're blowing our servers out every Wednesday night for 1 hour. So I'm going to move you to Sunday night and give you 3 hours instead of 1 hour. And I've been there ever since. So it's been 12 years now. I've went from that network after 10 years to the Truth Frequency Radio Network, where I've been for a little over 2 years. And it more aligns with my content, the audience does. And we've been building audience ever since. And now I think our last analysis, our data analysis last month, we were in the top 50,000 websites on the web. So it's been a long road, but our content is so high quality. Yeah. I can spend 6 days doing research for a 3-hour program, and we've done very well at building the listenership. And I'm just, it's still a hobby. I don't make any money at it, but I really enjoy it every Sunday night for 3 hours between 8 and 11 p.m.
You actually expect to make money at this, Brooke?
No, it's just a hobby. It lets me talk to the world for 3 hours a week, all the things that are on my mind and the research that I do. And it also helps me promote my books. So it just gives me a little outlet to let some steam off once a week.
Yeah. I mean, I was actually concerned because I was listening to the one broadcast you did, episode 118. And I was listening to that, and you kind of start out with that, like, I've been doing this, kind of like what you just did. And I was like, please don't tell me you're
quit.
You're gonna quit.
I consider quitting 1,000 times, but I never do. Yeah. I figure I wake up Monday morning and go, well, that wasn't so bad. I'll put another one together, and I just do it 1 week at a time, one moment at a time, same as I do my life.
Yeah. I mean, great shows, guys. I mean, for all our listeners out there, if you want, go out to, Truth Frequency Radio and look up Brooks. And, great. I listened to it. Like I said, I was listening to your last episode, and I was concerned at first. I was like, oh no, he's not going to quit. That's what the impression I got at first. And it was like, oh no, he's just talking about in all the years he's been doing this. It's gotten to this point, which I think we're all frustrated with. I have a really hard time. Hats off to you guys, because I have a really hard time not slipping back into my political days and having my opinion on what's going on in America, especially with what we're doing. Because it is funny as I look at Lasers in the Jungle joining us in the chat room. One thing that's really cool about us is most of our listeners are actually out of the country, and they don't care about our politics. They think we deserve what we get.
Right? Yeah. But they're all affected by it.
But they all, unfortunately, and that's the sad part. And that's the politician I'm looking forward to hearing, is the one that says, hey, look, we're going to keep our noses out of other people's business. That's the one that I want.
I like that one. That's generally the Trump message, America first.
America first. Well, yes, I agree. I do agree with that.
We're gonna stop changing the world's diapers. Okay.
Yeah. You're absolutely correct. I mean, I agree. And the fact that he's like, hey, look, some of these people need to belly up to the bar here and start paying their tabs. And, we're not going to stop. But see, I also believe, you're talking to a libertarian who is social. So I do believe, who has a social leaning. In other words, we do have a responsibility to help. How do I say this? And this is not altruistic in any form or fashion, I don't think, but I'm going to say it. We do have an obligation to help those that can't help themselves. That doesn't mean fight wars for people and dictators and stuff. That means, for me, if there's people that are hungry, we need to do everything we can to help feed them. The only time that we care about countries and people that are starving is when there's oil or pipelines that we want to build through their country. And unfortunately, that's wrong.
Well, that's true. But even when we don't, and it kind of disgusts me, actually, it's summed up best in something Trump said this week when talking about Hillary. He said, Hillary says it takes a village. Well, she should know she took several in Haiti.
Yeah.
You see, there's no pipeline coming through Haiti.
Yes.
But there was money.
If you listen, I did not know this, but if you listen to the people of Haiti, they will run her and the Clinton Foundation out of there. So if the Clinton Foundation is such a wonderful program and it helps people and it's so generous, why are the people that were supposedly supposed to get helped by this foundation, why are they in pitchforks and wanting to storm the castle?
Because they went to the TV and said, oh, don't you think this tragedy is so terrible? If you could just send $10, send $20.
Yeah.
Well, people did send money, about $1 billion worth. And then about 5.7% of it went back to Haiti in the form of some shanties that they put up and maybe a bulldozer to clean up the streets. And the rest of the money went into their giant slush fund.
Well, you have that, and the other thing too is, didn't they offer them these what they would be considered predatory loans to the Haitian people? If you want, we'll loan you this money that was donated. So basically, what they did is they pulled an IMF on these people of Haiti, where they went to these poor people and said, we're going to loan you, we're not going to give you this money because you're not going to appreciate it. So we're going to loan it to you at such a low rate. And then you're going to pay us back because that will make you feel good about yourself. And so all these people took these loans and they can't pay it back. And now their property's being repossessed. And it's crazy how, people need to look into this stuff. And
we do. And we talk about it without getting nasty. It's very academic. I don't raise my voice. I don't call names. Yeah. But I do tell the truth. And I cover a lot of science on my program too. We cover a lot of space programs that are out there. I call my buddies up at JPL and say, what you got cooking, and maybe give some leading edge stuff. I talk about not political science, economic science too. Sure. What's going on with the special drawing rights bonds that the IMF and World Bank are putting together. How's that going to affect the dollar? What is happening between the balance of the yuan, the Fed's inflating U.S. dollars and what that means for the stock market, your savings, and maybe what you should be doing with your extra dollars that you're trying to put together for retirement.
Yeah. No, I mean, great rounded show. I mean, I love your show. I listen to it and stuff. You're my background. I appreciate that. Yeah, no, you're my background. I like it.
During
the week and stuff when I'm working during the day. And And, it's always a pleasure to have you on, Brooks. And, I just, we got 2 more weeks, right? And then we'll know for sure.
Yeah, 2 more weeks. But I drove by the polls again today, and the line is still 200 people.
Awesome.
So it's, the polls are putting as many people through there as they can. I think tomorrow we have 2 more polling stations opening up, which are fire stations not far from me, to keep up with the load. They've never seen anything like this.
That's awesome.
Since Cabarrus County has existed, which this is one of the original 13 colonies, folks. So it's been around a long time.
Yeah.
They have never, ever, ever seen voting like this before.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's refreshing. And, I know where I'm voting. I know who I'm voting for. So it's just, and it's also important too that you vote that down ticket as well, because, you don't want to give, the White House to Trump and then neuter him in Congress, because he's already got an uphill battle. But I think most of the politicians, most of the rhinos there, and most of the guys, the traitors, and unfortunately Wisconsin, Ryan, I think a lot of those guys will come in line, or they'll be looking for other jobs.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, what we're seeing, and this Gettysburg Address that was given had some really key points in it. One was, for every new regulation that comes on, 2 will be retired.
Yes.
And this is a sub-part to this he hasn't brought out yet, but he's going to bring it out later this week as he develops this platform. And that is, as workers inside the agencies, all the departments, bureaus, administrations, and agencies are, as those people retire, they're not going to be replaced.
Yes.
And there will even be incentives for early retirement.
Yep.
I know people at the EPA who have worked there for 44 years. 44 years, and they have had a grip on I was going to use a word, but I won't use it because it's a family radio program, on the privates.
Yes.
Of U.S. Businesses. Well, that's why we call them the Environmental Protectionist Agency.
Yes.
Because these half dozen individuals have been in the EPA for so long, and they control it. They run that as a business. It's a private organization. They work for the oil companies. How do I know this? Because the oil companies pay them billions of dollars every year to do primarily one thing: keep competition off their back.
Yeah. Yep. No, I agree. I mean, he said that. The other one too is that the lobbying, if you work in the executive branch, you can't lobby ever.
You can't lobby foreign countries.
Yeah, foreign countries. If you work, if you work in the Congress or whatever, when you come out, you got to wait 5 years before you can go
5
work.
years. Yeah, and I think that's a great idea, because
term limits. Oh,
it's a revolving door up there. When he's talking about draining the swamp, that's how you do it.
Oh, look, I can tell, and I don't have a problem. And if the FBI wants to come and talk to me or interview me, I can tell you, in a former life at a former company that I was a partner with, we used to get phone calls all the time. Look, you're going to go to this political dinner and it's $25,000 a plate.
Yeah.
I mean, we would get, my business partner, who was the finance side of it, I was just the technology side. He this guy was traveling in jets all over the place. And it was like, wow, it must be nice. And, Gary, and he's like, well, this is part of doing business. If you want to have government contracts, you have to do this. And we literally had a jet. We had to fly in a jet because we would get these phone calls, or they would get the phone calls and say, hey, look, there's this governor's having a dinner, and it's a fundraiser for his office. And if you want an appointment with the governor, if you come to the fundraiser, we'll set it up for the next day. It's $25,000. And it would be like, well, wait a minute. Can we just meet with the governor? No, you got to go to the fundraiser.
That's right. That's right.
And that's how people don't realize that's how politics work. I mean, I spent a lot of time on Fisher Island down in Miami with politicians, and sitting there and listening to their their BS. I mean, and for it stinks to high heaven, but that's how it works. And, like I said,
hopefully we're on track to fix it.
6 months, 6 months if I start walking now.
Yeah, well, I don't think there are any more frontiers on this planet. I don't think there's another America to go to.
Yeah.
This was the greatest experiment in human anthropology. And I think that it's so amazing because this country, America, has affected the world like no other country.
Yes.
Positively, like no other country in history. The thing that surprises me, and my friends and I were talking about this the other day, is there's no mention of a nation like America in the Bible anywhere. It's not mentioned. And there are all kinds of little things, all kinds of, Babylon this and, the great whore of the earth and blah, 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 that everywhere. But no mention of a country that's established on the principles of liberty and freedom and individual responsibility. I think that the founding fathers that put this together, either most of them were, or at least some of them were, either time travelers or they could see the future. Because what they read in the New Testament and what they could gather out of the book of Daniel and Ezekiel, etc., they said to themselves, I'm not accepting that future. We're going to make another future. We're going to make a country where the government actually serves at the pleasure of the people. Yeah. That the people allow themselves to be governed. And that's the way we're going to set it up. And it worked that way for a long time until 1933, when Roosevelt changed it. And from then on, and you've heard this, I know you've heard it a lot of times from a lot of mouths, that America survives by the rule of law. Well, it's not any longer the rule of law. It's the rule by law. Yeah. But Americans were not supposed to be ruled. We're supposed to be governed. And there's a big difference.
Huge difference. Yeah, your old, that statement about time travel. All right. So let's do, all right, Brooks, we know that time travel is possible. We just haven't had the device yet to do it. But in theory, theoretical physics tells us that time travel is possible.
Sure.
If you could pick a point in time in which you get a one-way ticket. You have a one-way ticket back in time.
Oh, back in time?
Back in time.
Knowing what I know now?
Knowing where would you go? Well, where would you go?
Wow. I would probably go, in the early 1780s.
And let me ask,
knowing what I know now.
Well, I'm going to add one more thing. And what would you take with you?
Oh, I wouldn't need anything, just the knowledge I have in my head.
Yeah.
If I had just the knowledge I had in my head, we would have peace through superior firepower. We would never have fought the War of 1812. Yeah. We would never have fought World War I or World War II. And we would never have fought the Spanish-American War or the Vietnam War. And we'd never invaded the Middle East.
Wow. See, I was thinking that for me, I would actually go back to the Declaration, to that period.
Yeah.
And I would take a copy, and I would take the U.S. Constitution with me.
Well, it's already written. 1787 was when the Constitutional Convention was.
But that goes back to your whole theory, though, of the fact that the Constitution had to have been inspired by a greater power or by a time traveler to know what they know. Yeah, to know what they know, to put in there what they put in there.
Because the Freemasons that gave them the money to fight the war, the Solomon brothers in Israel and the rest of them, they had a prophecy of a new Jerusalem.
Yes.
And that's why the British soldiers didn't fight so hard to beat them, because most of the officers were also Masons.
We're also Freemasons,
exactly. So, but they didn't know what the New Jerusalem was. They knew all about the symbolism. They knew all about the importance, but they didn't know exactly what it was. It took, Jefferson to start it with the Declaration, but then it took great minds like Madison and Locke to put the guts of it together and work it through the convention and get it ratified.
Yeah. Yeah. And they all had to agree to it. So a lot of people that we made mention of the Freemasons. So people don't know this, but Freemasons, if you know an individual, it is inherently, I don't want to say illegal, but it is to the point to where there are consequences to you and your soul as a Mason if you knowingly take a life of another Mason. That is, there are significant.
There are places
penalties
down here in York,
yeah,
where actually the Revolutionary War and the Civil War were fought. But when the Revolutionary War was being fought down here, the British soldiers, you know, how you used to line up on the other side of the field for the Union soldiers, and they would just stand there and shoot 50 caliber rounds at each other. But the British soldiers were ordered to shoot their rounds into the trees over the heads of the Union soldiers. And they stood there and took the rounds of the Union soldiers. Yeah. They sacrificed themselves for this nation. And those bullets are still stuck in those trees down there in York.
Wow. The history. Yeah, that's incredible. You know, one of the things that, you know, as a librarian for the Masonic Lodge in Chicago, I had the opportunity to read articles on Civil War, North and South, and Masons fighting Mason. Well, they didn't fight, but they talked about how they would get together and hang out. And it was great stories. Great stories.
Well, during the Battle of Valley Forge, one of the British officers was captured, and his personal belongings were gathered up and brought to Washington because Washington would redistribute them among his men who were so poorly outfitted. And one of the items that was brought to him was a satchel, like a half a duffel bag. And on that satchel were the Masonic symbols. And so Washington said, "Take me to this man that owns this satchel." So Washington met with him, treated him fairly while he was a prisoner of war. After the war, the guy was released and went home to England. But when that man got close to death, Washington himself traveled to Britain, dressed him for burial, and attended his funeral.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it is truly a brotherhood, you know, and unless you experience it and live it, you don't understand it. But yeah, it is. But yeah, it's one of those things that once you discover that another gentleman is a Mason, then it's hands off. Yeah, you are not to bring any, and you're actually supposed to do what you said. You're supposed to actually do whatever you can do to make them safe or secure. So, oh well, that's another topic for another day. As we have Leo Zagami on the show, the true Illuminatist. And what a battle. If you haven't listened to that show, Brooks, you need to definitely listen to that one. The battle that he's up. He is he's the Grand Master of the Masonic Lodge of Rome. And,
oh, wow.
And the infiltration. He is fighting the infiltration of the Catholics and the Jesuits and for taking over the Masonic lodges. And a lot of people don't realize that is where the corruption lies in a lot of your Masonic lodges, is through the Jesuits and the Catholic takeover of these lodges. And they're steering them away from their core beliefs and stuff. So that, like I said, that was a eye opener for a person who is, number one, who was raised Catholic, and then number two, for a Mason, such as myself. So,
well, there are bigger fish to fry. We have mosques all over the country.
I tell people most Masonic lodges are a place where guys go to smoke cigars and get away from their wives.
Pretty much. It's a boys' club.
It's a boys' club. It is a boys' club.
They don't understand what it's all about.
What the true nature of it is. Yeah, that's right. And then when you get into the esoteric, then you do what I do, is I'm not affiliated anymore. So I'm still a Mason. I'll always be a Mason, right? But I'm just not affiliated with a lodge anymore. Well, Mr. Brooks, I is there any parting gifts, any parting wisdom that you want to bestow upon myself and our listeners?
I will let your listeners know that Birth Volume 3, which is called The Gathering, is almost finished. It's Chapter 28 was finished today.
Awesome.
And that's getting pretty close now. It's just over 300 pages. I expect it to be around 400 by the time it's finished. So I would say mid-November, if I don't get terrifically busy, it should be in print. I'm going to reissue the books as a trilogy with a special trilogy price. But if you have not read any of the Birth Trilogy, volumes 1 and 2 are out on Amazon. And if you'll buy them there and send me proof that you purchased them, I will send you the audio versions of those 2 books for free. So if you're not a good reader, don't worry about it. I read it for you. You can listen to it in your car or on your phone or while you're working at your favorite workstation during the day when you're not listening to Midnight Ocean Radio. And trust me, it's a white knuckle ride. It is a true story. It is an action adventure with fictional characters, but you're going to change the way you look at life and death by the time you get done with these books.
So in the first one is Birth. Is that 2 Earths, 1 race?
Yeah, 2 Earths, 1 race for time.
And then the second one is Birth.
The Gathering.
The Gathering. Okay.
I'm sorry, the Grand Division.
The Grand Division.
And then the last one is The Gathering.
The Gathering, which, oh, wow. Well, I'm definitely I'm going to pick those up. I'm a hard copy. As you know, when you interview authors and stuff, they send you the PDFs because you got to keep costs down. But, for me, I'm just, we're building a bookshelf. I've got to have that hard copy.
Well, these are cool looking books too. They just, my publisher does a really good job on the covers, and the back covers are exciting. And we're not in bricks and mortar stores, because I am self-published. Yeah. And, frankly, the book insurance is so expensive now. It's now, over $1,300 per year per book.
Book insurance? Why do you have to, are you afraid the book's going to give someone a paper cut?
No. Book insurance is required by any bookstore so that if the book doesn't sell, they can get their money back.
Gotcha.
So even though I've been publishing now for 12 years, I've sold, well, I don't know how many books, a lot. I've never, ever, ever had to return a book. So even though that is the case, the book insurance company makes a freaking fortune off of authors. $1,300 per year per title. So it gets expensive.
Yeah, because you got to think about, all right, so $1,300, you look at the production of the book. I mean, that's like 100 books. Right, is what you're paying for. Well, if you look at, $1,300, so you figure $10 a book, right, to produce a book.
The author only makes about $2.60, and that's if you're self-published.
Yeah.
So they're taking half your profits for the first 100
for the first 100 books. Exactly. Right. That's what I'm saying. Is that's what a racket, and you got to have
it. It is a racket. It is a racket.
That is crazy, and that's why you guys got to go out to Brooks's website, and you got to purchase the books off of Amazon. We actually have links to your books on our site.
That's great.
So yeah,
that's great. Well, buy the heck out of them. And if you just want to buy the audio, you don't want to collect the book, that's fine. You can go to my website, which is x2radio.com, all one word. The books are for sale there for less than $5 audio. Yeah. And they're read by me. So you got the author's passion behind the words. And you're not going to find a high quality audiobook for that price nowhere. No. Not even Cracker Barrel.
Yeah. Yeah. So no, I agree. I mean, I got into the audiobooks for a while, but I find that my attention span, I usually put them on while I'm going to bed. And so I'm always like, what is I?
Duh.
Yeah. Well, but that's how I sleep. That's how, so Brooks, I just want to let you know that your voice one night is going to put me to sleep.
Yeah, probably will.
As my voice does for so many out there. as they listen. I get all the time. I've got a real good listener. She goes, yeah, my husband, I joke with her, joke with her husband all the time. She goes, yeah, Jeff.
What do we need Ambien for if we have Jeff?
That's right. Jeff will put us to sleep. Well, I don't know to take that as an insult or as a compliment.
Well, think of all the people you're keeping from getting addicted to sleeping pills.
That's right. That's the best way of doing it. So, all right, my friend, it has been long, and I appreciate you hanging in there with us and joining us and talking about the hollowed earth, and great conversation. And, it is refreshing, the fact that you didn't get into the wacky stuff. You stayed in the science. I am very happy. Thank you. I don't know how I would have dealt with that.
Science is good.
Science is good. I appreciate, the science. The science is good because it's just so much credible. But,
well, I'm grateful for you giving me the time to set the record straight.
That's it. I appreciate it, my friend. You take care of yourself. I'll be in touch. I'm gonna go ahead and order these books. I'm gonna send them to you if you don't mind putting your signature on them.
Oh, no problem. I'd love to do that.
Yeah, and you don't have to send me the audios. I'll read the book and stuff. So
very cool. Very cool.
There you go, my good friend Brooks Agnew joining us. What a show! What a conversation! Oh, goodness. I think what we're going to do, guys and gals who are joining us, we're going to take a quick, I'm going to go ahead and play that. Yes, Lasers in the Jungle. It's very important that we support our authors. People take time, and also the guests of the show. You got to understand the commitment that it takes to do these types of shows, to take time out of their busy schedule. I forgot to ask him what the score of the Cubs was. And everything. So, wait, let me see if he's Brooks. Are you still there?
Yeah, it was 6-0.
6-0. What inning?
It went all the way to 9, but
they got us.
Indians were hitting homers.
Wow. Oh, come on. We got to root for the Cubs at the end of days.
Oh, we're going to have a series. I have a feeling the Cubbies are going to come back.
Yeah. Oh, well. All right. So, all right. I'm going to put you back on mute. So there you go. There's our report. Now we're going to get, knowing our luck, YouTube's going to ding us for doing Major League Baseball, for giving out the score, but who cares? Come on, Cubs. We got to root. Let's get a universal, rooting for the Cubs. Some would say that wouldn't be a good thing. Some would say that's the marking of the end of days, is when the Cubs actually win the World Series again. Man. So as I was saying before I interrupted myself, what I want to do is I played that song, Ed Roman. I want you guys to listen to this. This is called ETA. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to reset the phone lines and everything, so we'll be able to take your calls. So we'll bring those in, and it'll be open topic for the rest of the night. And we will take your calls. If you want to call in on the Skype line, we'll put those numbers up there, but it's TMO listener on the Skype line. And it will be open topic. I prefer that you guys kind of call in and tell me what your theories are on the hollow earth. For those that want to know, tomorrow, I want to tell you this. Tomorrow, I actually will be playing the interview that I did with my friends and Sandy the night that we saw the UFO. Tomorrow, we're going to have the UFO International group on. They're going to be representatives. Actually, they're going to be joining us from Great Britain. And we are going to be playing that recording that I made the night that I saw my very first UFO. So that's going to be tomorrow night. And then, of course, we're going to be taking opinions and stuff from our guests, UFO International, and we will also be taking calls and things like that. So I just want to say thanks once again for Brooks for Brooks joining us on the show tonight. And also, please make sure you get out there and you purchase his books. And you can, if you want to know how to purchase them through the Midnight Ocean, do so through there. We don't get a surcharge. We don't bump the cost or anything. It is the same cost that you get at Amazon. But if you go through us, that helps us promote ourselves. It gives us a little bit of pennies, little shekels to pay the bills around here to keep the show going and everything. So I'd appreciate that very much. Our accountant, definitely, Miss Sandy, would definitely appreciate that, as we're ending up our month and redoing internet fees and hosting fees and all of those things. That would help us out tremendously. The other way that you guys can help us out here at the Midnight Ocean is if there's a product or service that you normally buy, shoot me an email, send it to listener.themidnightocean@gmail.com. That's listener.themidnightocean@gmail.com. I'll see it in our affiliates if we have a program for that particular product or service that you are going to purchase. And that way, what we can do is we'll get that out to you. We'll get you a discount, right? Which is always good. Number one. And then number two, what will help us out tremendously, we'll get some, I don't want to say kickback, but we'll get some money for sponsoring, and promoting them. And if you want to see our current list of sponsors, you can actually go out to themidnightocean.com. And from there's a page called, sponsors and another one called affiliates. So you click on that. And so you guys know from the legal standpoint, we did have to break them up. The sponsors are people that have given us money to promote their ad. Affiliates are people who will pay us if you click on the links or whatever. And from a legal standpoint, that's why they're broken up. We want to be full disclosure, so you know. And I'll tell you that tonight's show was sponsored by Scott Lemriel, great guy, great guest. We're going to get him back on the show here soon. Also, Brendan over at Liver Medic, and of course Jeff Hayes. And I'll tell you, man, great book. I got the books this weekend and started to read them, and they're just incredible. And it's been a while since I've actually read them from their, especially the first one in the series, which is about almost 5 years ago. Oh, Lord, as we wind down, like I said, let me get this reset here and we will clear all of this out. Just give me a second because I want to play this song for you because it's a pretty cool song. And like I said, it's from my good friend, Ed Roman. And we'll take a quick break, and a 3-minute break. We'll come back, and then we'll reset and take your calls.
Estimated time of arrival.
was our good friend Ed Roman. Kind of caught me off guard here as I'm resetting the connection lines. But you're listening to the Midnight Ocean radio show and a podcast. I am your host, Jeff Norton. You can join me here live every weeknight from 10 p.m. till 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, or on the web at www.themidnightocean.com. With that being said, the phone lines are open. If you'd like to give us a call, please feel free to shout at us at 352-388-3900, 352-388-3900. I would like tonight, if you can, I know I said open lines, but I'd like tonight to be more focused on what do you think about Hollowed Earth, what you heard from our very special guest, Brook Agnew. And I'll tell you, I'm sold. I really am. You know, the fact that the depressions, like I said, he said that, the fact that with the satellites and the imagery and who is to say? I mean, the Earth science that has been taught to us over the years is based upon science that was done in the 1600s. You know, we had a gentleman on yesterday, Robert Zimmerman, who wrote a whole series of books on the space program and all of the so-called beliefs that came out of that system. And a lot of them are no longer beliefs. We found that we got them wrong. So who's to say that when it comes to Earth science, that we don't have it wrong as well? You know, we've only dug 7 miles. That's the deepest that we've ever gone into the Earth's outer crust. 7 miles. We have not even we haven't even scratched the surface of the core. So who's to say how deep the actual crust is? You know, if it's 800 miles and then you have, 1,200 miles between, people don't realize, if you ever Google the Earth's crust, you'll see how many thousands of miles the Earth is deep. I remember watching a video where they talked about how deep the ocean is. It was utterly amazing. It was on Facebook. Talking about Facebook, if you're watching us on Facebook, we'd appreciate if you share this broadcast with your friends and your family. That would be ever so cool. We'd appreciate that very much. And of course, if you're watching us for the first time on YouTube, make sure you also get the word out. You can share us. We don't have a problem with that. You can post the show on your website, your links. We allow you to distribute the show. And we just want to say thank you for that. But, what a show tonight. You know what I'm probably going to do, guys and gals, for tomorrow's show, because we're going to have a big show. We're going to have the UFO group is going to be coming on. UFO International is going to be joining us. It's going to be a kind of a round table. I'm going to be playing the audio of our eyewitness accounts of my first UFO sighting over the weekend. We will have that, and we will get feedback from you guys. So it's going to be a pretty big show lined up for us tomorrow. If there are no callers at 352-388-3900 or TMO listener, feel free to call in. Feel free. You are more than welcome to call in. But if there are not, I think what we will do is that I can do this every once in a while, right? We've gone over in a couple shows. I think the net is I can call it a little bit earlier and then get lined up for tomorrow's show. If there are no callers, if anybody wants to call in, obviously I will talk with you. I love talking to people. I especially love talking to my listeners that are out there. I would appreciate it. But all right. So the number to call in one more time, I'm going to give it one more time, 352-388-3900 or TMO listener. Feel free to call us and we will powwow. Or we can just call it a night and all of us can get a jump on tomorrow. Tomorrow's going to be a great show. I can't wait to do it. UFO International to be joining us. I will tell you on Thursday, we're going to have Stanton Friedman is going to be joining us. That's right. The one and only Stanton Friedman is going to be joining us from the Skype line from the great country of Canada and everything. So without further ado, I think we're going to wrap this up, put a bow on it. What do you guys think? We can do that tonight. I appreciate it. I appreciate everything you guys have done for me, the support, the love that you guys give us here, the fact that I know you guys, some of you guys are working really hard to get the word out to help promote our show. And I just want to say thank you. I mean, that's how we're going to grow this. I'm, trying really hard to get better at the craft. And I think we're doing an okay job. I think all of us are doing an okay job. There's a lot of people that are working on this, from our sponsors to myself and the people that give me support during the day, that give me shout outs and call me and stuff. So it's all good. It's a team effort, but I appreciate you guys. I appreciate you guys hanging in there, coming out every night, listening to us every night and spending your time. I mean, that's the most precious thing that anybody can offer is their time. And the fact that you guys consistently spend 3 to 4 hours a day listening to the show, listening to me, listening to our guests. That means so much to me. It means that we're reaching out. We're doing the things that we need to do. And what's really cool, as Lasers in the Jungle, man, we are reaching out. We are international. That is right. That is right. We are reaching out internationally. And that is incredible. The fact that technology is awesome. The fact that we are able to communicate on the other side of the world. And as we learned tonight, after talking with Brooks, I believe the earth is hollow. Let me say, I believe that the earth is not exactly what we've been taught, but what we are experiencing. And the science is there, like grains on a scale, another grain. And I'm definitely going to do more research, and we are going to be bringing on more guests. I know some of you guys were wanting to hear about reptilians and the David Icke and all of that stuff with the center, but Brooks is a scientist, and I'm not going to broach, nor am I going to insult his integrity by asking those type of questions. Well, I'll get another guest on. I've got 1 or 2 lined up. They're going to be very entertaining. And if there's a guest that you would like to hear on the show, you can actually send me a chat, the TMO listener. If you join up for that on Skype, I will accept your friend request there. You can send me a chat. You can also send me an email at listener, that's LISTENER, .themidnightocean@gmail.com. Shoot me an email there, and I will try to get them on the show. We'll work really hard. Well, with that, without further ado, I am going to say goodnight. We're going to sign off. We're going to pull this ship up to the dock a little ahead of schedule. And, but it's okay, because we're definitely going to go long into the night tomorrow night with our guest, UFO International. Be well, be safe, but more importantly, be loved.
coda, but I learned it from my baba. It's not what you believe, it's what you do. It's what you do. It's what you do. It's what you doing now.
Jeff Norton on the Paranormal State Radio Network.